Chapter 9:17. Zhang Yan's real body woke up, and everything that happened to this body after entering the continent was clear to him. With a thought, the demon's subduing slip suddenly shook, and the majestic essence energy formed from the bodies of the sky demons poured into his body with the force of a dam bursting. First rank of spirit contract, second rank, third rank. His magic power rose, and in a few breaths, he had reached the great perfection of the fourth rank. At this point, the devil slip seemed to want to push this cultivation method down, but it was blocked by his origin consciousness and was forcefully suppressed. His real body had not entered the grotto heaven, and it was not the time to go up. But the moment he gathered his magic power, he released energy into the sky, and his breathing shook the ground. Be it demons or mortals, everyone felt their legs become unsteady, and they all fell down. In an instant he was the only one left standing. He looked around, and with a grab, he caught a bird demon in his hand. There was no spiritual opportunity in Donglai continent, and mortals could not cultivate. But this person could turn into a demon, wasn't that strange? He gathered his energy in his eyes and focused. In an instant, he saw through everything from the outside to the inside. The reason why this demon could reach this stage was because there was a thread of extremely weak and weird energy in its body. This energy could activate vital energy and true essence, and use spiritual opportunity to drive it. It could suppress mortals here. But to this demon, this was not a blessing, but a curse. Because of the pressure and blood being squeezed out, after a year and a half, this demon would definitely die. At that time, all of its energy would be taken, and it would return to the person with that energy. First, he would use the demon to kill and swallow the energy. Then, he would take it for his own use. Such a method reminded him of the Chua dragon that was imprisoned here. This demon was not like the other demons that were suppressed. It did not have the ability to stir up trouble, and its fighting abilities were not strong. However, there was a heaven-bestowed supernatural power. Even if one's body was reduced to ashes, as long as there was still a strand of essence left in the world, one could create demons and create chaos. After absorbing enough essence, one could gradually recover. Zhang Yan thought about it carefully. The chaos in Donglai continent happened hundreds of years ago. Most of the demons in the 3 western continents had escaped in the past 100 or 200 years. The timing matched. He sneered and casually threw the bird demon to the ground. He looked at the demons below the slope. He took a deep breath. A trace of scarlet purple flashed between his brows. Then, he exhaled and let out a clear shout. Boom! The sound of this shout, like a clap of thunder in a clear sky, brilliant and impressive, a gust of wind appeared out of nowhere, like a raging inferno, rushing down the slope. Countless fiend demons below looked as though they had been crushed by rolling stones. Blood spewed from all 7 orifices and their tendons and bones were shattered. The bird demons in midair had their wings snapped and fell like rain. When the sound of the wind dissipated, all the demons in the sky and on the ground had died under his shout. For a moment, the world was silent. Zhang Yan raised his head and looked at the sky. Although Donglai continent did not touch the roots of the earth, it had mountains, rivers, and earth veins. Moreover, it was in the real world and the small world, so there should be spiritual opportunity. Yet he could not feel it at all. There had to be a reason for this. He relaxed his mind and followed the direction of the spiritual opportunity. After a long time, he finally felt the abnormality. It was not that the spiritual opportunity did not exist, but that it was being robbed. The source of all of it was actually on the outer continent restriction array. This array had been in operation for tens of thousands of years and covered the land of the continent. It needed spiritual attachment to exist, and as such, it needed to fight for spiritual opportunity with the people in the continent. Coincidentally, this array followed the path of emotionlessness. It only took and did not care about anything other than itself. Even if the spiritual opportunity in the continent was cut off and the living beings were in trouble, it had nothing to do with it. Zhang Yan knew that there were Taoists in Donglai continent. They probably left because they could not compete with the array. He turned around and looked around. He did not expect that these tens of thousands of people were the only people left in this continent. Although there were demons in this continent, Humans were spiritual beings. There were people who took the blood of the demons and used it for themselves. If it could be passed down, there would be a chance for them to survive this disaster. However, this method was only used by a small number of people and did not benefit the people. Hence, when it came to the end, it was still difficult to solve the problem. Thinking about this, he could not help but sigh. This disaster is not something you can overcome. However, if everyone in the world has a way to protect themselves, how can we allow the demons to wreak havoc? At this moment, someone suddenly knelt down and kowtowed, saying, "Priest, please teach us." The few people behind him also came to their senses and knelt down, saying, "Priest, please teach us." As if they were infected, the tens of thousands of people on the slope knelt down like the wind blowing the wheat, shouting for the method. At first, it was chaotic, but not long after, it was loud enough to shake the sky. Zhang Yan heard the unwillingness, anger, struggle, pain, and other emotions in the voice and was slightly moved. He looked towards the horizon and thought back to what he had experienced in the 3 continents. There were some similarities and differences, but everyone in this world suffered from weak spiritual opportunities. The West Sink continent could be said to have weak spiritual opportunities. The West Sink continent could be said to have weak spiritual opportunities. The West Jew continent could be said to have broken spiritual opportunities. As for Donglai continent, it could be said to have exhausted spiritual opportunities. If he created a method that did not focus on spiritual opportunities and did not need the help of others, he could just adjust his breathing and refine his own energy to enter Tao. What would happen then? As this thought rose, his heart shook. When I entered Tao, I saw that the path of cultivation was controlled by Xian men and aristocratic families. I once said that if I were successful in my cultivation, I would think of a way to change this situation. Since I entered Tao, my heart has not changed, and my determination still exists. When I create a method, I will open another door for those who wish to enter Tao, and pass it on to the future. Therefore, my Tao is not my Tao alone. It is the Tao of tens of thousands of people, the Tao of millions of people, the Tao of all sentient beings in the world. As he thought about this, he faced the many pairs of expectant eyes and opened his mouth. If the heavens don't want you to wait, I will. If the heavens don't want you to wait, I will. If the heavens don't want you to wait, I will. As he spoke, his voice pierced through the clouds and shook heaven and earth. Rumble. He raised his head and looked up. Thunder clouds gathered in the sky, and after a short while, rain started to fall. At this moment, he was enlightened and touched the secrets of the heavens. In that instant, he understood what Tao he was pursuing. A mysterious feeling came out of nowhere. It was reflected in his mind. At this moment, he felt like there were countless waves pushing against his back, urging him to move faster. It was as if as long as he took this step, he would be able to enter the grotto heaven realm. However, at this critical moment, he ignored the external disturbances and did not move. Even if this path was opened, he had the heart but no action, the flower bloomed but no fruit, and it was not perfect. At this moment, he took a step forward. He would collapse halfway, and in the future, it would be hard for him to step onto the path. He needed to finish it well, to deduce this technique, only then would his heart be able to respond to the Tao. To achieve the true Tao. Before this, there was still one more thing he had to do. He looked down the slope. He saw that among the corpses of the monsters, there was an energy whirlpool floating up and charging into the sky. It flew down and left behind a sentence: "The monsters and demons are not all gone, I need to kill them. Wait for me to return." After saying this, he rose up, turning into a streak of light and followed the energy. After flying for a day and a night, he saw that the threads of energy came from all directions, gradually gathering into one and drilling into a dry well underground. He looked at it for a moment, then lowered his body and went down as well. After a few thousand feet, he reached the pit. In front of him was a 10 feet tall dark hole that led deeper. He followed along the path and saw that the cave walls were smooth and had no edges. It twisted and turned like a snake's cave, but it wasn't tight at all. After a few miles, he stepped into a huge stone cave. There was a 1,000-foot-long reflective wall that was as bright as a mirror. Within it, there was a hornless dragon swimming about. It was just 3 feet long, its body was white and warm like it was carved out of jade. At this moment, it was swallowing the energy that floated in. As it swallowed and spat out, one could see a drop of blood rolling around its body. Each time it did one round, its body would swell up a little. It seemed to have sensed Zhang Yan's arrival and stopped. It stared over with its red jade-like eyes and asked, "Who is here?" Zhang Yan said loudly, "Qinsong Zhang Yan, I am here on orders from Timing Ancestor to take you in." Chua Long came to a sudden realization and said, "I was wondering why my energy was so lacking. So it was you who spoiled my plans." As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed. "What a pity, what a pity. If you came a year later, this body of mine would have been able to soar out of here. At that time, your entire sect can forget about finding me." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Even if you leave this continent, if you continue to torture the living beings, then even if I don't take you in, others will come to subdue you." Chua Long laughed and said, "Eliminate the weak and preserve the strong, this is the heavenly Tao. All living beings in the world should be food in our mouths, yet all of you are meddlesome. Don't you think it's a sin?" Zhang Yan sneered. "According to what you said, I'm strong while you're weak, so I'm acting according to the heavenly Tao by annihilating you? In that case, you should just accept your death obediently." Chua Long could not help but choke. He snorted and said, "There's a saying in the world, the winner takes all. Even if you win today, I won't argue with you. However, this is not the end of the game. We'll meet again in the future." As he spoke to this point, his originally vigorous aura actually weakened bit by bit. In Zhang Yan's eyes, he could see that the spiritual vigor around him was leaving his body quickly. That part of his body had become dim and dull, like a beautiful jade that was slowly turning into a piece of stubborn stone. He knew that the demon knew that it could not defeat him, so it dispersed its own energy. However, it was not nonsense when it said that they would meet again in the future. Just now, when he came in, he had already seen that the demon's vitality and energy were not here, so he could not take its life today. This entanglement would probably drag on for hundreds or even thousands of years. He thought about it. If Tai Ming Patriarch had the intention back then, it would not have been difficult for him to find Chua Long's vitality and not kill it, as he purposely left it for the younger generation to deal with. After all, suppressing and annihilating the 5 demons was also a way to achieve the middle technique. If it was obtained too easily, it would be difficult to prove this technique. However, he could not do this, and it was impossible for him to look at this place all the time. The best way was to do what he had thought previously, to pass down a technique to inspire the people to rise up and then kill this demon. At this moment, he saw that there was still a strand of blood remaining in the body. He had an idea and reached out to grab it. This blood was condensed by Chua Long, and it could be considered as the blood of a sky demon. However, at this moment, it had already lost its spiritual essence, so it naturally did not have any magical effects. However, he thought about how the Tsang dragon's remains were now missing. If it was obtained by a great demon, it would be a disaster. Chua Long was the son of the Tsang dragon. If he obtained this drop of blood, he might be able to find its whereabouts. He took out a jade bottle and kept the blood in it. He shook his sleeves, and in an instant, wind blew under his feet, and he flew into the sky. Chapter 9:18. Forest Upper Plains, Shuntian Slope. The heavy rain continued for 2 days and 2 nights, but it still did not stop. Ever since Zhang Yan left, Leho had led a group of officials to wait here, not leaving even half a step. One of the officials could not help but say, "My lord, we do not know when the celestial master will return. The weather is cold and the rain is bone-chilling. My lord, please take care of yourself. Why don't you go back and rest? I will wait here for you." Leho shook his head. "If I don't do this, how can I show my sincerity?" Scribe Lin walked up and said, "That's right. My lord cannot leave this place." The official's expression was unhappy. "Official Lin, my lord has been fighting the demons for days and is already exhausted. If he does not rest now, I fear he will not be able to bear it." Scribe Lin's attitude was unyielding. One who travels 100 miles is only 90 miles. Since my lord has made up his mind to wait, how can you leave halfway? The official was a bit angry and raised his voice. Since official Lin says so, then I might as well ask a question. If that immortal master doesn't come in a month, will we have to wait for a month? If he doesn't come in a year, will we have to wait for a year? Lu Hou heard this and was a little shaken. If he knew when the celestial master would return, he would be willing to wait as long as possible. But as the official had said, if he really did not return for a few years, what should he do? If he was an idle person, it wouldn't be impossible. However, he was a marquis of a county. After the great calamity, there were still many things to arrange. If he wasted his time here, he would probably be delayed. Scribe Lin saw that he was tempted and hurried forward. He grabbed his sleeve and said sternly, "If others want to leave, they can leave. But my lord, you must not leave even half a step." The officials were shocked by his actions and began to reprimand him. "Official Lin, what are you doing? How rude! How rude! Let go of me." "Official Lin, calm down. How can you be a teacher like this?" Scribe Lin did not care. He did not care at all. He only stared at Lu Hou and said, "Celestial Master Zhang's thunderous roar must have killed half of the demons in the world. When the Celestial Master returns, pass it down. My lord, you can gather the troops. Tidy up the country." After that, he would exterminate the demons and restore the land of the 8 counties, bringing prosperity to the world. For the sake of millions of people, what does it matter if the marquis suffers some rain? Lu Hou was silent for a moment before he sighed. "Exterminating the demons and re-establishing the dynasty has been my father's lifelong ambition. Fortunately, immortal Master Zhang has taken pity on me. My path will never end. Teacher's words are reasonable. I will wait here." Scribe Lin said, "Exactly. If there's anything here, you can leave it to us officials to handle. Marquis, please wait here for the immortal master to straighten out the people's hearts." Lu Hou nodded repeatedly. Scribe Lin was afraid that he would be swayed again, so he pointed down the slope. "Marquis, please look." Lu Hou turned his head and saw tens of thousands of people at the bottom of the slope. At this time, not a single one of them had left. Everyone had a look of anticipation on their faces. His heart trembled. Ever since the chaotic world began, everything he saw was lifeless and apathetic. But now it was different. He took a deep breath and said, "I understand. Teacher, please be at ease. If the immortal master does not return, I will not leave the slope." Scribe Lin was satisfied. He let go of his sleeve and said, "If that's the case, the officials can rest assured." Fortunately, they did not have to wait for too long. After another day, layers of clouds could be seen coming from afar. Among them, there was a dazzling golden light that flickered incessantly. When it reached the top of the crowd, it turned into a wisp of pure white air and descended onto the slope. Then, they saw a Taoist with fluttering robes walking out. Lu Hou was excited. He quickly went forward and knelt down. He said, "Commoner Li Shugong welcomes the immortal master." The officials behind him and the tens of thousands of people on the slope also knelt down and kowtowed, calling out, "Immortal master." Zhang Yan looked up and said, "Lu Hou, please get up. Since I said that I would pass the technique to you, I will definitely keep my word." Lu Hou bowed and wanted to stand up. But he was indeed tired from the past few days. Although he was young and strong, he could not bear it. He had just stood up when he collapsed again. The servants beside him saw this and hurriedly came forward to support him. However, they were pushed away by Lu Hou and shouted, "Move aside, I will do it myself." As he said this, he gritted his teeth and stood up. Zhang Yan glanced at him and stretched out 2 fingers to point in the air. Lu Hou's body trembled, and then he felt a warm current surging through his body. The fatigue that he had accumulated over the past few days disappeared, and his body felt lighter. How could he not know that he had received benefits? He immediately bowed deeply. He said, "Thank you, immortal master." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. With another flick of his finger, a golden talisman flew out and floated down. He said, "Keep this item well." Lu Hou hurriedly caught it. Just as he was about to ask what it was, he saw a series of techniques flash before his eyes. He was stunned on the spot. Zhang Yan had not started on creating techniques yet, so the one he gave did not involve cultivation. Instead, it talked about how to boil the corpses of dead demons into medicine and blood soup to strengthen one's inner yuan. If an ordinary person were to consume it, not only would they live longer, they would also have the ability to fight against demons. It was 10 times, no, 100 times better than the crude techniques that the mortals had come up with previously. But because this technique was obtained by killing demons, once all the demons in the world were eliminated, it would naturally be useless. However, the Donglai continent still had the Hui dragon to deal with. This battle would last for a long time. It was likely that he would have to wait until he created a new technique before he could change it. But at that time, he would not only teach it to the person in front of him. He would pass it down so that everyone here could hear it. Lu Hou comprehended for a while and finally came to his senses. He bowed deeply to Zhang Yan and said, "Thank you, immortal master, for the technique." Zhang Yan pointed to a large mountain in the distance and said, "Where is that?" Lu Hou could not answer. Scribe Lin stepped forward and said, looking at the direction, "That should be Green He Mountain." Zhang Yan said lightly, "This mountain is tall and beautiful. It can be used as a cave. If you are in danger, you can come here to find me." When he finished, he waved his sleeves and rode the wind, disappearing into the clouds. Lu Hou and the others did not want him to leave just like that. They hurriedly bowed and sent him off. When he was out of sight, they slowly got up. Lu Hou looked at the golden talisman in his hand. After thinking for a while, he raised his hands and sent it to Scribe Lin beside him. He said respectfully, "Teacher, please take a look." Scribe Lin was a little surprised. He looked at Lu Hou and saw that he was sincere and not faking it. He thought for a while and then took it. After reading it, he did not say a word. Then he passed it to someone beside him. That person was a little hesitant but could not resist the temptation. He reached out and took it. His face was both disappointed and glad. He thought for a while. He also passed it to another person. In the end, including Lu Hou, there were a total of 12 people who had seen it. Lu Hou stepped forward and took each person's hand with one hand. He said, "The ways of the world have deteriorated. I alone cannot hold up the sky. From today onwards, I will rule the world with you all." The 11 people looked at each other and did not move. Scribe Lin shook his sleeves and was the first to step forward. He said, "Your humble subject accepts the order." Seeing this, everyone came to their senses. They stepped forward and bowed. They said, "Your humble subject accepts the order." At this time, an old subject said, "Unfortunately, although the method imparted by the Celestial Master is exquisite, I have not heard of the legendary method of immortality." Scribe Lin chuckled and said, "I think this method is very good. If that kind of method needs to be cultivated for years and is time-consuming and laborious, when can the Marquis realize his ambitions? As for the method of immortality, do you all want to abandon the Celestial Master and enter the mountains to enjoy the wind and dew?" Everyone shook their heads. Scribe Lin said in a low voice, "That's it. Moreover, the Celestial Master has his own considerations for bestowing the method. It is not something we can comment on. Please speak less in the future." Everyone suddenly felt a chill and nodded in agreement. Scribe Lin breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, there was one thing he did not say, and that was that these demon corpses were in the hands of Lu Hou and the other powerful subjects. This way, they could maintain the original hierarchy, and they could smoothly raise the army to fight against the demon. But if it was a method that everyone could obtain and learn, perhaps after a long time, the hearts of the people would not be satisfied. Before that demon could be completely eradicated, the music would break down and there would be internal strife. Only the current situation was suitable. Zhang Yan left the obedient slope and flew south. Not long after, he arrived at the foot of the Green He Mountain. He stopped for a while and looked for a suitable place. He landed on the ground and used his mana to open up an abode. Then, he sat down in the abode. He already knew what the road ahead was. Next, it was time to think about how to proceed. He created this method to prove himself and not to force the people of the world to enlighten. It was using his own heart to replace the people of the world, and his own desires to become the desires of the world. This was a disadvantage. Those who have the heart will enter, those who have no heart will leave. Those who are fated will be content, and those who are not can give up. He was not the parents of the people of the world, so there was no need to force the cause and effect on his own family. After the people of the world obtained the method, what they should do and where they should go would have nothing to do with him. In other words, once this method was created, he would be able to obtain the method. Even if there was only one person in the world who practiced it, it would not hinder his path of Tao. However, this method did not rely on external objects and did not rely on spiritual opportunity. If the people of the world could use this to achieve Tao, who in the world would want to enter the mountain to be apprenticed to? How could the aristocratic families of the Shen men control external objects? This method of breaking the roots and digging the grave, once it was thrown out, it would cause a huge uproar in the world. When that time comes, whether it was the master or the disciples, the aristocratic families would want to kill him first. He could imagine how many wise men and sages from the past to the present had the same intention. However, they probably all saw this point and did not dare to take a step forward. However, he did not need to worry about this point. Not to mention that his cultivation was not enough to deduce a method that could directly enter Tao. Even if he did, he would not throw it out in one go. He thought to himself, with his cultivation level, to be able to deduce the method to the stage of opening the meridian, so that the people of the world would no longer be blocked by the jade elixir essence pool when they entered Tao, it was already not bad. As for after entering Tao, to move up, one would still need to rely on spiritual opportunity and external objects to move forward. But even so, it was not without calamities and tribulations. He felt that the people of the world were being bullied by the demons and withered away. That was why he was enlightened and decided to create a method to prove himself and help others. However, as the saying goes, what is good is strange, what is good is evil. Although this method made it easy for people to enter Tao, but once it was spread out, who knows how many cultivators in the world would increase. When this generation came, they would definitely rob the external objects and fight with this cultivator for spiritual opportunity. Looking at the source of the chaos in Donglai continent, it was the big continent's prohibition array and the people fighting for spiritual opportunity. One could imagine, if this method appeared in the world, it would not be benevolent and kind, but it would definitely cause endless killing. It was as if he could already see the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood behind it. Until one day, when he had a glimpse of Tao and completed this wonderful method, he would be able to eliminate it. And he, the person who created the method, would definitely have to face all sorts of tribulations along the way. However, after receiving benefits, he would also have to bear the karma. This was his own Tao. How could he retreat in the face of danger and not do anything in the face of difficulty? Others did not dare to, but he dared to. Thinking about this, he smiled and threw away all distracting thoughts. Holding the jade remnant in his hand, he closed his eyes and meditated. His mind slowly sank into it. Chapter 9:19. East Hua Continent, Floating Heavenly Palace, Daylight Hall. A golden light flashed, and 3 people appeared in the empty space in front of the hall. The one in front was a middle-aged cultivator with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His hair was tied up in a bun, and his eyebrows were high. He had a short and thick beard, and he looked very capable. Behind him was a young man dressed in Taoist robes. He had a delicate face and a spiritual aura. However, his eyes were lively, and he seemed to have a lively personality. The middle-aged Taoist walked to the door of the hall and called out to Daoren, who was on duty on the stone lotus throne. Perfected cultivator Chin. Daoren opened his eyes and looked around. He purposely looked at the young man for a moment and sighed. He waved his hand and said, "Go in. Hall Master Hua is waiting for you." The middle-aged cultivator bowed and called out to the young man who was still looking around curiously. He led the young man into the hall. The young man felt that they were already far away, so he asked softly, "Senior brother, is that Daoren a member of the Qin clan?" The middle-aged Taoist said in a deep voice, "That has nothing to do with you. When you're here, remember to speak less and do more." The young man chuckled and said, "Senior brother, Master doesn't have so many rules." The middle-aged Taoist sighed and said, "Do you know how great of an opportunity it is for you to become a disciple of perfected cultivator? I'm limited by my talent, and I'm only an in-name disciple. You must cherish it." When the young man heard this, he quickly retracted his smile and said seriously, "Little brother understands." The middle-aged Taoist was satisfied when he saw that the young man did not want to brush him off. The two walked for hundreds of steps and saw an endless flight of stairs that extended into the clouds. They did not know where it led to. The middle-aged Taoist sped up and arrived at the bottom of the stairs. He bowed and said, "Hall Master, I've brought Sui Yanzhan here." A deep voice came from above. "Order him to come up." The middle-aged Taoist turned and said, "Junior brother, perfected cultivator is calling for you. The enlightened being is calling you. Follow this staircase and remember the method of circulation that I taught you. You can go up now." The young man nodded and was about to greet his master whom he had never met before. He also felt a little uneasy, but he did not dare to be careless. He followed the mental cultivation method that the middle-aged Taoist had taught him, and after circulating it a few times, he walked up the stairs. He had thought that the stairs were just a little long, but now that he had taken the first step, he realized how difficult it was. He felt as if a heavy burden was suddenly pressing down on his body, and every step required him to use all his strength. He could only grit his teeth and persevere. Fortunately, there were no obstructions along the way. After an hour, he successfully reached the top of the stairs, but his whole body was exhausted, as if he had been fished out of the water. At this moment he looked up and saw a Taoist sitting in the hall. The Taoist was dressed in a golden robe and had a jade ruler in his hand. His body was surrounded by golden rays. One moment it was like a blazing sun, the next moment it was like a golden blade. He knew that this was his teacher, Huoxian, the side hall master of Qinsong School's Daylight Hall. He hurriedly knelt down and paid his respects. "Disciple greets master." Huoxian said, "You're able to pass the ascending heaven steps, so it's obvious that you've put your heart and soul into practicing the method passed down by master, unlike the previous people." The young man was bold and he asked curiously, "May I ask master, where did those people go?" Huoxian said expressionlessly, "This place is full of spiritual vigor, and not a normal person can stay for long. If you neglect your homework, you'll naturally be invaded by external qi. You'll die from having your meridians broken." The young man was shocked, and only then did he know that just now, the Guanyuan was so dangerous. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, and he could not help but feel glad that he had been taught the method. He cultivated diligently every day, and there was not a day that he slacked off, unlike those unlucky people. Huoxian shook the jade ruler in his hand, and a few spiritual lights flew down. He said, "I'll give you 2 talismans, one for self-defense, and the other for flying. You can cultivate this method first, and when you reach the Xian light realm, I'll give you another method." Ever since he became the son-in-law of the Chen clan, although the Chen clan allowed him to take in many people to teach him Tao, these people were all disciples of the Chen clan, and there was no master-disciple relationship between them, so they were not considered his disciples. Therefore, after cultivating for hundreds of years, he did not have a single disciple. However, for cultivators, other than those who believed that they could enter Tao, which one of them was not afraid that there would be no one to receive them when their lifespan ended. Therefore, after he took charge of the side hall of the Daylight Hall, he had the idea of taking in disciples. Although he was distancing himself from the Chen clan, he was still from an aristocratic family, and Zhenrenchen was still alive, so it was not appropriate for him to do so. However, half a year ago, Zhenrenchen was reincarnated, and he no longer had any scruples. He picked a few talented children from the Frost Manual to teach them. However, to protect the reputation of the Chen clan, he only ordered them around in name, but in reality, they were no different from his direct disciples. When the young man received the talisman and the method, he immediately took it out. Seeing that he could point at it with his mind, the talisman naturally responded, and it flew and spun. Huaxian was only interested in his talent, and he did not care if his action was rude, so he said, "From now on, you will cultivate here. You can walk around the outside of the hall, but there is another world inside the hall. However, with your cultivation level, you cannot enter yet." When the young man heard this, he could not help but feel a little disappointed. He rolled his eyes and asked, "I heard that there are 3 halls in the heavenly palace, Upper Pole, Duzhen, and Daylight. Can the disciples of the other 2 halls go there?" Huaxian said, "Although Zhang Yan, the master of the side hall of the Duzhen Hall, is on good terms with me, he is currently traveling outside and is not in the hall. You don't have to go there if you have nothing to do. As for the Upper Pole Hall..." As he said this, his body suddenly trembled, and he stood up from his seat. He looked in the direction of the Upper Pole Hall. He saw that in the sky, there were clouds and water. It was surging and it was surging. However, in the Longyuan swamp, it was as if there was an elephant hiding in a cave. The waves were rolling here and there as if they were boiling. The sky and the water resonated with each other, and they were ready to jump. He could feel that there was a surge of spiritual vigor stirring in the heaven and earth. Even his body was shaking, and he could not stand steadily. He hurriedly used his ruler. He activated the prohibition in the Daylight Hall, and then it stopped. At this moment, not only him, but the people in the various grotto heavens of the Qinsong school were also startled, and they all looked at the strange phenomenon. After a while, a loud and clear voice was heard. "The Longyuan hangs upside down, the tide rises, and the water flows for 3,000 years. The clear waves wash the sun and moon, and the water in the sky is equal to the heavens." As the voice rose, a 10,000 feet waterfall rose from the sky, and it went straight up until it connected with the sky, and it controlled the sea of clouds. At this moment, the sound of water surging could be heard everywhere in the Donghua continent. If one looked up to the north, he could also see the heaven-connecting Xian water in the north, and the water was so thick that it could control the 4 seas. Huaxian was stunned, and he said, "Senior brother Qi has entered the grotto heaven." However, at this moment, there was a sound of jade cracking, and the clear sound spread out in all directions. He was surprised, and he turned his head to look. In the southern sky, there was a cluster of stars rising. The light was spinning, and the aura of treasures was like a wheel. The sound came from the south, and the brilliance fell on the world. Its momentum was so great that it actually did not lose to the water form. His expression froze. It was actually another Dharma. He couldn't help but think, there was such momentum in the south, and there were stars passing through the sky. It was very likely that someone from Yuxiao school had also achieved the grotto heaven. In the upper extreme hall, Sun Jinren and Mengzhen sat on the high platform, and they were both looking far south. Mengzhen looked for a moment, and said, "Among the younger generation of Yuxiao school, only Zhou Yong and Wu Fenggu could achieve it in these 100 years. However, this kind of starlight, and the appearance of dancing heaven and earth, it must be the Zhou family's heavenly universe realm Tongshu. This person is without a doubt Zhou Yong." Sun Jinren laughed coldly and said, "After Yun Tian achieved the grotto heaven, this person also stepped into it. How can there be such a coincidence in the world? He could have entered this door a long time ago, but he purposely waited for Yun Tian to enter before stepping out. Moreover, his momentum was still flourishing. This is to tell the world, the next generation of our 2 sects, that Yuxiao is superior to us, Qinsong?" Mengzhen said in a deep voice, "This is not surprising. Yuxiao had the intention to lead Xianmen before the previous generation's master of Lingya ascended, and it was simply stopped by our 4th generation's master. Looking at it now, they might not have given up on this idea." Jinren's son said coldly, "Senior martial brother, you are speaking like a gentleman. Why would the Zhou family want to lead the Xianmen? It's obvious that they want to monopolize the spiritual opportunity and turn the 9 continents into their own territory. It's just that the world situation is dictated by us, Qinsong and Shaoqing sects, and the Devil's sect is watching from the outside, so they can't do it. I dare to say that their heart is not dead, and their thoughts are not dead yet." Meng Zhen said indifferently, "The spiritual opportunity has no owner, and those who are capable can control it. If they have the intention, Then let's see how capable they are under the three tribulations. Yuxiao School, Department of Defense, Ming Grotto Heaven. Zhou Ruing looked at the bright spiritual light on Mochiu Cliff. It was as brilliant as brocade, and he could vaguely see the 8 stars in a row. He was both envious and praised. Martial nephew Yong is worthy of being personally taught by master. His foundation is deep, incomparable to others. She turned to the dressing table, and with a wave of her sleeves, an illusion appeared. She said, "Senior brother, Uncle Master has made a clever move this time, allowing martial nephew Yong and Chi Yun Tian to achieve success together, just in time to reduce Qinsong School's prestige." The illusion in the mirror laughed. "In my opinion, Uncle Master's move is unnecessary." Although Qinsong School seems to have lost a great deal of power, since that internal strife several hundred years ago, many outstanding people have died. Their vitality has not yet recovered, so why disturb them first? Zhou Ruing frowned. Isn't senior brother looking down on Qinsong School? Chi Yun Tian has already obtained the method. If it wasn't for Zhenrenqin reincarnating several years ago, I'm afraid it would have become like the 12 Grotto Heavens again. I'm afraid it will return to the situation of the 12 paradises in the past, standing above all the other sections. When Sect Master Qin took over, I thought that the Yudsong sect would never be able to recover. Who would have thought that in just a few hundred years, it would become like this again? The illusion in the mirror said disapprovingly, "Junior sister, at present, apart from Meng Jida's profound cultivation base, Yen and Zhu only rose up by relying on Master's kindness. Even if Sun Ji Yen has some ability, his cultivation base is not enough, so there's no need to fear him." Furthermore, among the aristocratic families of Qinsong School, after the war in the past, the Su family only existed in name, and later on, the entire family was annihilated. The survivors have been suppressed by Qin Mabai for the past few hundred years, so it can be said that their morale is gradually declining. Now that Qin Taiping is dead, Du, Xiao, and Han can only bury their heads and go into seclusion. Moreover, there's still the Yen family master and disciple that haven't been eliminated. It can be said that there's internal strife and external trouble. It's far worse than when Qin Qingang was in power, so there's no need to be so afraid. Zhou Ruing said, "But let's not talk about these people. There's still Shen Baishuang, Chi Yun Tian, and that Zhang Yan." The illusion laughed out loud and said, "But our Yuxiao also has Zhou Yong, Ruing, Wu Fenggu, these kinds of talents, which are not any weaker than Qinsong School. Moreover, if the previous plan succeeds, I'll borrow the essence from Qin family, which can at least delay that Zhang Yan's path for 300 to 400 years. When the time comes, he might not be able to keep his life. Junior sister, don't worry." Chapter 920. In Donglai continent, more than 100 years had passed since Zhang Yan's incarnation entered Mount Qinghe to cultivate. After Lord Lu received the teachings of Zhang Yan's incarnation, he trained his troops and attacked the demons. The next year, he regained control of the entire province and established a dynasty. However, at this time, there were demons gathering outside the continent to fight against the imperial army. Due to a moment of carelessness, they suffered heavy losses and suffered several defeats. In order to gather people's hearts, Lord Lu received advice from Prime Minister Lin and used half of the country's resources to build a temple and a high platform in Mount Qinghe. He worshipped Zhang Yan as a virtuous celestial master and led people to worship him every year. Lord Lu reigned for 30 years and personally led troops into battle 22 times. It could be said that he spent his entire life on the battlefield. At the age of 50, he passed away due to a heart ailment. After his death, his eldest son died early and his eldest grandson ascended the throne. At this time, the Lu dynasty had already occupied 4 provinces and half of Donglai. However, after decades of war, the people were exhausted and the population was declining. They were temporarily unable to expand their territory. Thus, with the advice of a wise minister, they stopped the war and recuperated for 20 years. At this time, the Lu dynasty had 1 million households and 100,000 elite soldiers. They felt that their treasury was full and their armor was sharp. Thus, They led their troops into battle and destroyed the 6 demons. They beheaded all of them and presented them at the foot of Mount Qinghe. From then on, whenever King Lu succeeded the throne, he would come to Mount Qinghe to pay his respects and pray for good weather and for the peace of the people. Every time there was a battle, he would first train his troops at the foot of the mountain to show his determination to eradicate the demons. At the back of Mount Qinghe, the mountain path here was different from the one in front of the mountain. It was rugged and difficult to travel. At this time, there was an ancestor and a grandson walking along the steep slope. The old man was over 100 years old but was still hale and hearty. His legs were strong and he reached a rock. He held his grandson's hand and said, "Mao, you must remember, all descendants of the Yu family who come to this mountain to pay their respects to our benefactor, regardless of age, must not walk on the right path in front of the mountain. This is to show their sincerity." His grandson was only 5 or 6 years old. He nodded his head as if he understood. Mount Qinghe was high up in the clouds. It took Old Man Yu 2 days to reach the peak of the mountain. At this point, the narrow mountain path had already come to an end. There was only a wide jade staircase. There were also rows of stone tablets on both sides. All of them had names written on them. The Li dynasty had its laws. All disciples of the imperial clan were required to pay their respects to the Shangde immortal master, or else they would not be listed in the imperial clan register. The names written here were all left by them. As he got closer, he could see more than 10 elite guards walking back and forth. Because every year people would come to this place to seek the Tao as a disciple, they were afraid that they would disturb the Shangde immortal master's peaceful cultivation. Therefore, the imperial court stationed this group of guards here. The leader of the forbidden guards sensed that someone was coming from below. He raised his long dagger axe and shouted, "Halt! This is the cultivation place of the immortal master of Shangde. If you do not have an edict, please leave immediately." Old Man Yu didn't panic. He walked forward and clasped his hands together. "General Lin, greetings." When the leader of the forbidden guard saw him, he quickly put down the long dagger axe in his hand and bowed respectfully, saying, "So it's Elder Yu." Then he looked at the child and asked, "Is this Elder Yu's grandson?" Old Man Yu replied, "Yes. While I still have the strength, I brought him up to pay my respects to my benefactor." The leader of the forbidden guard stepped aside and said, "I have duties to perform and can't accompany you. Elder Yu, please take your time." He knew that although the people of the world were indebted to the immortal master, there was only one family that could call him benefactor, and that was the Yu family. Rumor had it that their ancestor was on good terms with the immortal master. Later on, the mother and son were personally escorted by the immortal master to the county. Both families had a deep relationship. The fact that everyone in the family, regardless of gender, lived a long life seemed to further prove this rumor. The current Le King had rewarded the Yu family several times and even summoned them to be officials, but the Yu family never accepted. Old Man Yu thanked the leader of the forbidden guards and climbed to the peak with his grandson. Among the people of the world, apart from the royal family, only the descendants of the Yu family could reach this place. He pointed at a mountain not far away that was shrouded in clouds and said, "Mao, oh look. That is the place where the benefactor cultivates." The child widened his eyes and looked at it curiously. Old Man Yu stroked his beard again and said, "100 years ago, your ancestor was just a newborn. If it wasn't for the benefactor's protection, his corpse would have been left in the wilderness and fed to the demons. The descendants of my family will guard the temple for generations to repay the benefactor's kindness. You must remember, no matter how the world changes in the future, do not let the common people disturb the immortal master's peace." The child raised his little face and said, "Grandpa, I will guard the cave for the benefactor and prevent the demons from coming up the mountain." Old Man Yu felt happy and laughed out loud, saying, "Good," 3 times. He lit candles in front of the mountain and prayed from afar. 3 days later, the candles were extinguished and the food and water were all gone. He had to go down the mountain. Before he left, Old Man Yu looked at the cave and sighed. Great-grandmother, on her deathbed, still couldn't forget. She wanted the descendants of the Yu family to personally thank the benefactor and Cao. "I'm afraid there's no hope for me in this life. I can only entrust it to Mao. He held the child's hand and sang a song in his old voice. Under the light of the setting sun, he walked down the mountain step by step. Spring passed and winter came. Another 100 years had passed. The old man had passed away long ago, and the child was now white-haired and old. Just like his ancestor, he brought the descendants here to pay their respects, hoping to see the benefactor. The current king carried on the legacy of his ancestor. He fought hard and finally chased the demons out to sea. He had already recovered 8 counties and acquired an island overseas, making it the 9 counties. On the day of his success, he thought that his achievements were unparalleled. He came to Mount Qinghe to offer sacrifices, just to see the face of the immortal. However, he did not get what he wanted and left with regret. Outside the Donglai continent, a dragon carriage floated in the air. This was where Zhang Yan's real body was. Because there was a breath of divine sense left in the body, he polished his cultivation day and night. It was a place where his cultivation had reached the peak of the 3rd stage. His mind had been immersed in the broken jade for nearly 200 years. If he were to calculate the time spent inside, it would have been 16,000 years. The difficulty of achieving this technique was far beyond what he had imagined. Only now did he realize that he had inadvertently stepped onto the right path by studying the erosion inscription. To achieve this technique, if one did not first understand the mysteries of heaven and earth, it would be useless no matter how much comprehension he had. When he reached the juncture, he could not take a step forward and could only sigh with regret. Even if he went back to cultivate, his Tao heart would be hard to repair and he would waste time. To do this, he must first understand the truth and understand the origin of fate. So, once he found his own Tao, he could attract the response of heaven and earth. In the broken jade, Zhang Yan's incarnation sat cross-legged on the ground. Countless erosion inscriptions floated around him. They were so dense that they could not be counted. However, as he concentrated, they gradually gathered and finally turned into 2 words. These 2 words looked simple, but a few scattered strokes seemed to contain infinite true meaning. However, it was like a broken mirror and a cracked tile. There seemed to be a place where they fit, but it was difficult to connect. It was as if only one stroke could make up for it in order to finally become one. He focused and calculated with his heart. After an unknown amount of time, a light flashed in his eyes. He suddenly raised his finger and wanted to point. However, at this moment, his movements paused. It was as if the stroke was extremely heavy. With this point, there was no turning back. In the future, even if he could really prove his Tao and ascend, he would probably be entangled with thousands of calamity techniques. If he was careless, he would die and his Tao would disappear. His soul would scatter and there would be no possibility of restarting. However, at this moment, he heard a soft ring from the Qinghong sword pill. It lingered in his heart and didn't go away for a long time. Zhang Yan nodded and smiled. Okay, with you by my side, what do I have to fear? It's just killing through calamities and grinding away all difficulties. His eyes turned to the erosion inscription and he thought, I hope that once this technique is born, all the fated people in the world can use it to enter the Tao. With a thought, he pointed it down. At this moment, a mysterious feeling surged into his heart. Without seeing, without knowing, he knew. Unclear but clear. Without understanding, he understood. At this moment, all the venerable grotto heavens in the world felt something and unconsciously looked toward the east. Zhang Yan's mind retreated from the broken jade. He slowly got up and stood with his hands behind his back. He looked into the sky and after a long time, he smiled and chanted, Don't fall into reincarnation and enter the universe. Pass the Tao in the human world. I am willing to kill thousands of tribulations with one sword and exchange the heartless for the sentient heaven. With this, all the restraints on his body disappeared and he took a step forward. Boom! The heavens and earth shook. In an instant, a wisp of mysterious qi surged out of his body and soared into the sky. It actually broke through the clouds and surged into the 9 heavens in one go. This qi covered the sky. Its appearance was chaotic, but its form was illusory. It was hidden in the clouds and was boundless. It was so deep that it could not be described with words. It was so vast that there was no way to describe it. It was unfathomable and filled the world. With this collision, the East Lie continent's restrictive formation shattered. The entire celestial mountain was shaken out of the small world and escaped into the real world. At this moment, something fell like a meteor and entered the mortal world. Under the impact of this chi, the high cloud that had shrouded the people's heads for thousands of years slowly dispersed. The stars in the sky were no longer covered and poured down from the sky. They shone on the mortal world and bathed the entire world. Once this Dharma appeared, it stood in the air. However, it circulated the 6 voids and breathed in and out the heaven and earth. With this traction, the earth's root that was buried in the depths of the earth reacted. There was a trace of spiritual vigor that extended from the spiritual veins of the mountains and rivers to the surface and broke through. Boom! This chi surged up. The west sunken continent that was far away from the extreme west was the first to bear its force. The earth shook and spiritual vigor gushed out like a spring and slowly cleared the sky. It was the same for the west sink continent and the west overlord continent. After the 3 streaks of spiritual vigor rose to the sky, they converged into one and surged towards the east. Not only that, the middle pillar continent, east flower continent, north underworld continent, south cliff continent, and the East Victory continent that was out of the sea also surged with earth chi. Spiritual vigor leaked out and sped towards the sea. In the continents of the world, wherever the earth's root touched, spiritual vigor rose and finally converged like a tide. It crossed the ocean and gathered at East Lie. On the clear jade spiritual cliff of Yuxiao School, a handsome young man suddenly stood up. He looked towards the east and let out a surprised sigh. The heavenly stars respond to its power and the 9 continents support its chi. This is clearly the sign of achieving the ultimate Dharma. Whose sect is this? Chapter 9:21. Above the Donglai outer sea, a cloud of chaotic mist floated in the air. Inside, there was the sound of thunder and lightning. It looked like it had returned to the time when all living things were born. As the boundless spiritual vigor surged in from all directions, its momentum became wider and wider. It spread out and gradually covered a radius of thousands of miles. At this moment, Zhang Yan's spirit was immersed in the one profound realm. He had no idea where he was. He seemed to be awake but not awake, like he was asleep but not asleep. However, every time he thought about it, a bolt of lightning would leap across the mist. Between the spiritual opportunity, there would be airflow rolling. After an entire 365 days and a sufficient number of circulations, this ball of chaotic profound energy slowly retracted and returned to his body. Zhang Yan suddenly opened his eyes. At that moment, there seemed to be a flash of purple lightning. Heaven and earth seemed to have suddenly flashed. He stood in the air with his sleeves behind his back. He looked at the surging waves in front of him and the vast heaven and earth. He felt the surging mana in his body that seemed to be able to stir up the universe. He couldn't help but think to himself, there was a saying in the records that when one becomes a grotto heaven, one can create lightning with a thought and move the wind and clouds with a breath. It seems like it wasn't an exaggeration. In his heart, he was filled with emotions. No wonder it was so difficult for people in the world to become a grotto heaven. Not to mention the difficulty of climbing Tao, even when one became a Dharma, the spiritual opportunity didn't come out of nowhere. He had to ask for it from outside his body. This was an advantage for the big sections. For example, Qi Yun Tian, Qing Chenzi, and the other direct disciples could get it from the spiritual cave. However, because of this, the normal disciples could only go to the grotto heaven to get the Qi. Even if they succeeded, they would be weaker. As for people like him, if he didn't have enough, he could borrow it from the heaven and earth. Now that he thought about it, Shen Baishuang from the sect, Zhenren Shen, must have borrowed the spiritual cave. If not, it would be hard for him to achieve what he did later on. As he stepped into this realm, he naturally gained all sorts of enlightenment. Many things that he didn't understand in the past suddenly became clear. He didn't enter the grotto heaven. However, he didn't know how strong the grotto heaven Zhenren was. All of them had the ability to shatter the sky and split the earth. Even if it was divine powers and magic powers, they would still be able to cover a radius of at least 1,000 miles. This was not something that Yuanian cultivators could compare with. It could be said that no matter how many Taoist cultivators there were in the grotto heaven, they could be killed with a flip of their palms. They were like ants. That was why he never acted rashly. Firstly, he cared about his own safety. He didn't want to lose the Tao fruit that he had painstakingly cultivated. Moreover, this world couldn't bear it, and it would ruin the place of cultivation for no reason. More than 10,000 years ago, the battle between sky demons and human cultivators was mostly outside the third heaven. But even so, it still caused the pillars in the center to crack and the strong clouds to cover the sky. When one reached this realm, many magical treasures would be useless. Now, once he used his Dharma, it would not be difficult for him to travel thousands of miles. Even if he could scatter it a little, what use would that be? If he didn't draw support from his own Fa Li, perhaps only a killing true weapon like the sun-embracing axe would be able to injure the enemy. Just as he was thinking about this. But he suddenly heard a clear cry. It was that clear swan sword pellet flying out. Looking up, it was completely clear and pure like glass. It seemed like a layer of dust had been removed, and one could see its true nature. This sword was connected to his mind. When he absorbed the energy of heaven and earth and evolved his Dharma, it absorbed the spiritual opportunity that surged over together. Who knew how many benefits it had obtained? That bit of true consciousness. He had already become incomparably lively and agile. Unfortunately, it was just like that. It seemed like it was still lacking a little to transform into a true spirit. Zhang Yan knew that it wasn't the right time. This clear swan sword pellet was the best of the Shaoqing sword flow. If it became real from Xian, it would definitely be a killing true weapon. That wasn't something that could be easily obtained. After entering the grotto heaven, his lifespan would be 3,000. At most, he would nourish it and refine it. Thinking about that, he had a thought and called it over. Then, he placed his hand on it and smiled, "In the future, I will definitely repay you." The clear swan sword gave out a clear cry and turned into a bright light, flying into his brow. He turned his body and looked back at Donglai. At this moment, there was something that needed to be solved, which was that unknown Hui dragon. If this demon wasn't eliminated, then the world wouldn't be at peace. Especially now that the restriction formation had been broken and there were no more restrictions on Donglai continent, it might have the ability to escape. If it went to the continent, not mentioning how it would harm the people, if it colluded with the North Sea demon, then it would definitely bring disaster to the world. When he was yuaniing, he couldn't find any traces of it. That was because his cultivation wasn't there yet. Now that he was in the grotto heaven, naturally he had the means to find it. He sat on the cloud and used his spiritual intent to sense. In an instant he scanned through the mountains and rivers of Donglai. Most of the demons were chased away by Yu Chao. The remaining ones were scattered in the deep mountains and forests. They weren't a threat. However, he noticed that there was a large portion that was hiding in the ocean currents in the west of the continent. Most of them were water race demons. His eyes squinted. The Hui dragon's essence energy could only be used by borrowing the power of demons. That place was most likely where it was hiding. Immediately, his technique moved according to his mind. In an instant, he went from the sky to the ground. With the momentum of 1,000 miles in a breath, he escaped to that place. In the easternmost part of Donglai, there were more than 100 towering cliffs on the sea. This used to be the location of a Taoist cultivation sect. However, after the spiritual vigor dissipated, it was scattered in all directions, leaving only thousands of empty caves. At this moment, in one of the caves, a white-robed scholar with sunken eyes was meditating. In his hand, he held a dragon-shaped jade pendant tightly. Ever since this person killed his senior apprentice brother 200 years ago and entered the continent, he searched everywhere for the ancestral master's treasure. However, the continent's spiritual opportunity was cut off. Although he could still fly, every time he used it, he would lose some mana. Hence, he didn't dare to use it casually. Hence, after so many years, he still couldn't find it. Until a year ago, there was an unknown change in the continent. The restriction formation collapsed and the stars appeared. Spiritual opportunity came like a tide. Although he didn't know why, he benefited a lot from the situation. Recently, he felt that the spiritual opportunity was getting lesser and it was going to return to how it was before. Hence, he thought of leaving. However, at this moment he sensed the ancestral master's treasure. Overjoyed, he ran for it without hesitation. However, when he found the treasure, he was surprised to find that there was a strange chi of essence in it. He couldn't use it, so he had no choice but to use his technique in an attempt to refine it away. However, after a few months of effort, his mana and chi of essence were depleted, but he still couldn't succeed. Although the chi of essence in the jade pendant was stolen to reside in the treasure, there was no movement in the past. However, today, it was trembling for some reason. The white-robed scholar was shocked and prepared to suppress it. However, at this moment, a white shadow leaped out from the jade pendant. It was like an exquisite jade dragon, only an inch long. It stared at him and said, "Fellow Taoist, don't waste your energy. With your ability, you won't be able to refine me within 100 years. However, if you can promise me one thing, I can leave on my own." The white-robed scholar was bewildered and said, "What is it? Say it first." The jade dragon said, "It's nothing much. Just leave this place as soon as possible." The white-robed scholar was stunned. He then laughed out loud and mocked, "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? The spiritual opportunity here is weak, so I can still subdue you. However, if you go to the sea where the spiritual opportunity is flourishing, won't you be like a dragon in the sea, unrestrained?" The jade dragon scoffed and sneered, "I'm not afraid to tell you that I have a pair of heads here. I'm afraid that the strange phenomenon that happened a few days ago is related to him. This person has a powerful background. If you don't leave now, I'll be in trouble, but you won't be able to escape as well." The white-robed scholar sneered, "Don't try to lie to me. Who has the ability to create such a strange phenomenon? If I really have such mana, where can I run to?" Just as he said that, the sky suddenly turned dark. The sun and moon moved, and the stars dimmed. It was as if everything had disappeared and turned into chaos. Then he was in a trance. It felt like a moment had passed, but it also felt like thousands of years had passed. When he woke up, he realized that he was in the sky and there was a handsome young Taoist standing in front of him. The person stood there like a mountain, and his chi was like the ocean. It was as if he was one with heaven and earth. One look at him would make one's mind tremble and his breath become unstable. The white-robed scholar was shocked. This breath was similar to the people in the rumors. As he thought about it, his body trembled and he did not dare to think further. Zhang Yan did not look at him. He turned to look at the jade dragon and said, "It's been 200 years, and we meet again." The jade dragon was a heavenly demon, the son of the azure dragon. It was knowledgeable. When it saw Zhang Yan, it knew that he had achieved the position of a grotto heaven. It immediately gave in and said, "Zhang Shangzhen, can you let me go? I'm willing to give up this body and only leave a strand of my soul to reincarnate in the human world." Zhang Yan said, "I know about your ability. You are born with a special species. Even if your soul reincarnates, as long as the essence you planted is not extinguished, you can find it in the future. You might be able to reincarnate again. How can I let you go? I must exterminate all of you so that the world can be stable." Chuolong's voice turned cold. "Since you know that I have this method, even if you destroy my essence, it will only destroy 200 years of hard work. As long as there are still living beings in this world, you can't kill me." Zhang Yan smiled and said with deep meaning, "Since you killed someone today, someone will come to kill you tomorrow. There is no need for I to interfere." As he finished, he gently waved his sleeve. Chuolong was not willing to die without a fight. Yuan Jinping originally wanted to give this child to Shangde Temple, but he was afraid that this matter would not be good for his family, so late at night he carried the child up the mountain, wanting to eliminate the root of the problem. But after all, this was his own child. Even though he was angry, he could not do it. After listening, Ru Ming stroked his long beard and said, "Can I take a look?" Yuan Jinping hesitated for a while, then nodded and said, "Priest, please let me take a look. If it really is a demon, then kill it, to prevent it from harming the people." He put away his sword, carefully handed the child over, and then looked at him with a nervous face. Ru Ming wrapped the horsetail whisk around the child and carried him over. He took a closer look and saw that the child was sleeping sweetly. He saw that the child's eyes were exquisite and he was full of spiritual vigor. He couldn't help but be surprised. He thought for a moment and asked, "May I ask, has there been anything strange in these years?" "Strange things?" Yuan Jinping thought for a while and said, "There is one. 3 years ago, when the thunder shook the sky, when the clouds were broken, there was a meteor falling. At that time someone saw it fall into the city, but later when someone went to look for it, they did not find anything." When Ru Ming heard this, he looked at the child in his hand, smiled and said, "So you are here." Floating astronomy. Chapter 923. Yuan Jinping heard Ru Ming's strange words and asked in surprise, "Priest, what do you mean?" Ru Ming saw his nervous expression and laughed, comforting him. "You don't have to be afraid, your son has a great background, he is not a reincarnation of a demon." Yuan Jinping's eyes widened, he ignored his manners and grabbed Ru Ming's sleeve, asking urgently, "Then, what is my son's background?" The people of the Donglai continent were different from the others. For more than 200 years, they had relied on killing demons to fight for a place to live. All demons had to be eliminated. This child was so abnormal, he would also suffer when he grew up, so it was better for him to do it. But now that he heard that he was not a demon, how could he not be excited? Ru Ming's words had a double meaning. "I can't say. You are a person of the mortal world, you don't have to get involved with the karma of Xianmen." Only then did Yuan Jinping realize that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly let go of his hand and took 2 steps back. He cupped his hands in apology and said, "I was rude. I just wanted to ask, how can you be so sure that my son is not that monster?" Ru Ming smiled and said, "It's okay. To be honest, I am a disciple of Celestial Master Shangde." Yuan Jinping was shocked and said, "Priest is a disciple of Celestial Master Shangde?" Virtuous and Benevolent Celestial Master was the title given to Zhang Yan by the Marquis of Lu, Li Shugong. Every time the king of Lu succeeded the throne, it would be given another title. Until now, there were more than 100 words, but the people were used to addressing him with 4 words. But everyone knew that this celestial master had been cultivating in Mount Qinghe for more than 200 years and had never come out. So where did this disciple come from? So he did not dare to believe it. Instead, he held his sword tightly. He pointed the tip of the sword at the person and asked doubtfully, "But what proof do you have?" If the person gave a wrong answer, he would stab him with his sword. He was not a weak scholar. Ever since he joined the army, he had taken secret medicines and drunk demon blood. He had also killed several demons with his own hands. Otherwise, he would not have dared to come to this deep mountain alone. Ru Ming said calmly, "I see that there is an immortal tablet of Master Shangde on this offering table. Why don't you light some incense and ask? We'll know when the time comes." Yuan Jinping looked at the immortal token on the table. He subconsciously nodded his head. He was the one who brought the tablet up the mountain. Although he had the intention to kill his son, he also hoped that a god would appear at the critical moment to stop him. He lit the incense, lifted his robe and knelt down, sincerely praying in silence. But after a few kowtows, a beam of light rose from the immortal plate. For a moment, the entire ancient temple was enveloped in golden light. It could be seen that there was an indistinct figure of a Taoist sitting on the altar. After Zhang Yan vanquished the demons, the entire Li kingdom was grateful and built a temple to worship him. There was also a portrait of him. Yuan Jinping saw that this Taoist looked exactly like his portrait and was shocked. He immediately bowed down and said in fear and trepidation, "I, Yuan Jinping, greet Master Shangda." After about 10 breaths, he felt someone pat his shoulder and a voice said, "Esteemed guest, please rise. Master Celestial has left." Yuan Jinping looked up and saw that there was no light on the table. He could not help but feel lost. But this Taoist Ru Ming was able to invite Master Celestial to show his divinity, so he must be his disciple. This time he had no more doubts. He bowed deeply and said gratefully, "If it wasn't for Taoist and Master Shangda, I would have killed my own child. But such a great favor. I really do not know how to repay it." Ru Ming said, "If that's the case, I actually have a matter." Yuan Jinping said solemnly, "Please speak, Taoist." Ru Ming said, "Under the orders of Master Shangda, I went down the mountain to find a suitable disciple. This child is fated with my sect. If you are willing, I am willing to accept this child as my disciple." Yuan Jinping was happy at first, but then he felt sad. He was happy that he could enter Shangda's sect, so naturally, he would be able to climb the celestial gate. He was sad that this child was born, and he did not even have a day to raise him. Ru Ming saw his expression and knew why. He smiled and said, "You don't have to be sad. I am also a Tongla person. Even though this child is accepted as Master Celestial's disciple, I will not force him to go up the mountain to cultivate. It won't be too late for him to come under me after he is done with his filial piety." He handed the child back and Yuan Jinping quickly went forward to carry him. Ru Ming took out another Taoist book and passed it to him, saying, "When this child is slightly older, you can order him to cultivate according to this method." Yuan Jinping carefully took it and said solemnly, "I will definitely protect this method and not let it leak out." Ru Ming laughed and stroked his beard, saying, "Master Shangda created this method to open the door to Tao for the people of the world. Anyone who is fated will be able to see it. If you are interested in the path of Tao, there is no harm in cultivating it." Yuan Jinping had only heard of the saying that the method should not be passed on lightly, but he did not expect this Master Celestial to do things so differently. He could not help but exclaim, "You are indeed a Master Celestial of virtue and extreme benevolence." At this moment he suddenly thought of something and asked, "When this child of mine was at home, all the animals and birds died. Why is that?" Ru Ming said, "This child was born with a spiritual seed. The inner qi in his body revolves on its own, and he can seize spiritual vigor from the outside. However, he also knows that those close to him are distant, so he only hurt these animals. I will give you a talisman to guard on the beam of the house. Then there will be no hindrance and it can also eliminate the supernatural, so he will be safe." Yuan Jinping's heart relaxed. Even though he did not know what was born with a spiritual seed, he was born and grew up in the world. It was better to live with the light and dust. It was not a good thing for others or himself to be abnormal. After thanking him again and again, he said, "The day this child was born, because I was still in the army, I did not have a name. I only called him Hongguang. Later I suspected that this child was not well, so I delayed it. Since I have entered the celestial sect, please give me a name, Master." Ru Ming pondered for a while and then smiled, saying, "It was originally a heartless heart beyond the heavens. After 10,000 years, it turned into a true spirit. It accidentally fell into the mortal world and gave me a dream. Now that I have wiped away the turbid face, why don't you name this child Jingqing?" Jingqing, Jingqing, Yuan Jinping repeated it twice and said happily, "Good, good, the big sun is the scenery, peace is the clear, this name is very good." His excitement might have been a little too big and startled the child. He woke up from his sleep. However, he did not cry or make a fuss. Instead, he started giggling and even stretched out his little hand to grab his father's beard. Yuan Jinping looked at this and was even happier. When he wanted to speak to Ru Ming again, he realized that this Taoist was actually gone. He knew that the Celestial's whereabouts were elusive. In his disappointment, he bowed to the sky and carried the child down the mountain. When he returned home, he followed Ru Ming's instructions and stuck the talisman on the beam of the house. As expected, nothing else happened. From then on, Yuan Jinping was no different from an ordinary child. At the age of 4, he went to school. Because he was smart, sensible, and polite. He was praised by his teachers. When Ran was in his teens, Yuan Zhenping took out the Taoist book and let him practice it. However, the world was gradually changing. As the big formation in the continent dispersed, drakes went into hibernation. There was no longer anything to fight with the people of Donglai continent for spiritual opportunity. In the past 10 years, there were many spirits and ghosts in the forest. Even the demons that were exterminated showed signs of revival. Therefore, the mobilization of the troops in the county was extremely frequent. As for Yuan Zhenping, he did not feel anything. He trained hard every day. For others, the barriers that were difficult to surpass were easily crossed by him. The more he trained, the stronger he felt his body was, and his eyes were clear. Once, he practiced under a tree. After he finished, he felt that the qi in his chest was surging like there was a stone wall. He raised his head and blew, and the branches and leaves of the tree scattered. As for his usual steps, he would feel the wind at his armpits and feel like he was flying. After gaining benefits, he immersed himself in it. On this day, he withdrew from his cultivation and discovered that it was already dusk, and it was nearing the end of the world. His eyes glanced and saw a book on the table. It looked a little old and tattered. He asked curiously, "That's weird. Where did this book come from?" He picked it up and flipped through it. He saw that it was a book about monsters. It was about a swordsman who killed demons. It was said that the swordsman's swordsmanship was brilliant and he killed countless demons in his life. He had a wife called Lady Sang. She was afraid of strangers and did not like candlelight. She usually did not leave her house. One mid-autumn day, the swordsman brought his wife out to admire the moon. Halfway through, he saw that the shadow was a strange tree. He immediately drew his sword and questioned the swordsman. Lady Sang then revealed her background. She was a mulberry tree that became a spirit. Because she admired the swordsman, she willingly married him. The swordsman was angry that she lied to him and killed her under the influence of alcohol. Before she died, Lady Sang said, "I have no regrets." After the swordsman sobered up, he was filled with regret. He immediately broke his sword and buried it with the tree that Lady Sang had transformed into. He built a hut next to it until he died of old age. His descendants buried him under the tree. A few years later, another tree grew. The two branches intertwined as if they were connected. There were many stories about killing demons in the marketplace, but most of them were similar. Yuan Zhenping had never seen such a story before. Hence, he read it with great interest. However, he was dissatisfied with the ending. He put down the book and said, "This swordsman is too pedantic." Just as he finished speaking, he heard a soft sigh. Green smoke rose from the book and turned into a beautiful woman. She had willowy eyebrows and cherry lips. Her skin was light and her bones weak. However, there was worry in her eyes. She looked pitiful. Yuan Zhenping was not afraid. Because his father, Yuan Zhenping, was now an official in the prefecture. Although he was only a youth, he had seen many demons. His horizons were much wider than the average person. He stood up and asked, "Who are you?" The woman bowed and said softly, "I am that Lady Sang. My descendants cut off my body and made it into paper. A strand of my soul has been attached to this book. I have never been able to free myself. Today, when I heard young master's voice, I felt that I was fated to meet you. If young master can help me free myself, I will definitely repay you." Yuan Zhenping said, "Then how can you free yourself?" The woman said, "As long as young master takes a few drops of your blood every day and drips it on this book, I will be free after 49 days. Yuan Zhenping frowned and said, "When did I agree to help you?" "Young master, just now you are not." Yuan Zhenping waved his sleeves and said coldly, "Your matter only sounds tempting. It can relieve my boredom. What does it have to do with me?" The woman covered her lips and revealed a pitiful look. She said with tears, "I did not expect young master to be such a heartless person." Yuan Zhenping sneered, "Heartless? Hee, you first used the book to tempt me and then used words to tempt me. You must have some ulterior motives. You are obviously a demon." As he said this, he pulled out the sword from his waist and slashed down. The woman did not expect this young master to turn hostile so quickly. She was shocked and wanted to dodge, but there was a flash of talisman on the roof of the house. She could not move and was immediately hit. With a scream, she disappeared like a bubble. The pages of the book also turned into black dust and scattered in the hall. A gust of wind blew over and swept the dust away, leaving no trace behind. Yuan Jingqing sheathed his sword and said coldly, "Demons and ghosts, how dare you stay in my house? Men, chop down all the mulberry trees within 1,000 steps of my house." Chapter 924. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. In the Donglai continent, due to the gradual recovery of the spiritual opportunity in the continent, demons appeared frequently. Fortunately, the Li dynasty was at its peak, and there were strong and elite soldiers guarding the area. Once these demons formed a group, they were immediately destroyed. Although they rose and fell continuously in the beginning, it was difficult for them to become powerful. Chongping County, Prefectural Governor's Office. Lord Yuan, I have brought the head of the cloud-moving king of Horseshoe Mountain. A general with a pair of pheasant feathers on his hat stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding a black wooden box high in his hand. Everyone in the hall could see that there were traces of blood seeping out of the box. Yuan Jinping raised his hand, and a personal guard beside him went down to bring the wooden box up. He reached out and opened it. In an instant, a stench spread out, but he did not seem to smell it. He even personally held up the hideous demon head to examine it. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he waved his hand for someone to take it away, and then drew a mark on the merit book. However, when he saw the names of a few demon kings on the book, his brush paused slightly. The generals below him were all jubilant. This cloud-moving king was a flower sparrow that had turned into a demon. There were hundreds of demon soldiers under him, and he often went down the mountain to capture humans and animals for food. Because he could fly and escape, it was extremely difficult to kill him. The prefecture had spent several months to set up a bait to lure him here. It was only yesterday that he was finally eradicated. Although a few small demons escaped, they could not cause much harm. At this moment, a civil official stepped out and said loudly, "Lord, once this demon is eliminated, the mountain road to the south will be opened. We will gather our troops and attack the 7 Arcana Demon King entrenched in this mountain. This way, the prefecture will be settled." Yuan Jinping said in a low voice, "Yes, we must eliminate him, but we cannot be too hasty." The civil official was stunned. This speech of his was something that had already been decided. Otherwise, he would not have dared to say it on his own. After thinking about it, he knew that there was a change in the situation. He quickly changed his tone and said, "Lord, you are right. I was too impatient." Yuan Jinping waved his hand and said, "It has nothing to do with you. The day before yesterday, I found out that this 7 Arcana Demon King is not one. There are 7 of them." 7 demon kings? The generals present all cried out in alarm. If it was a few hundred years ago, demon kings were nothing. At that time, the Yu Chao Great Lord could kill dozens of them in a single battle. However, after the world was pacified, demon kings were rarely seen. 2 or 3 demon kings in a county were enough to alarm the imperial court. One had to know that a demon needed at least 10 iron spear generals, as well as strong bows and crossbows. Only then could he take it down. However, such a person had to consume the essence blood of demons and use secret medicines to wash their bodies. At the very least, they had to be refined for more than 10 years. If they were placed in the army, each of them would be able to fight against 100. Originally, there were 32 iron spear generals in the county. However, after killing the demons several times, there were also some casualties. Now, there were only 27 people left to fight against the 7 demon kings. Their chances of winning were extremely low. One of the generals said worriedly, "During the reign of Emperor Wuzong, the demons were chased into the sea. We thought that the world was peaceful. Who would have thought that it would not be peaceful for another 20 years? Another person added in a low voice, There are rumors that a female demon has infiltrated the imperial harem and caused chaos in the imperial court. Yuan Jinping's face suddenly darkened. He shouted, "Nonsense! This is only a rumor among the people. As officials of the imperial court, how can we talk nonsense? You will be fined half a year's salary." His prestige as an official was very strong. With this stern face, most of the people in the hall did not dare to speak. Only the civil official who spoke first was not afraid. He said with a solemn face, "Sir, the 7 Arcana Demon King needs to be eliminated quickly. Otherwise, it will become a big problem." Yuan Jinping said in a deep voice, "I also know this. However, the county soldiers have been dispatched repeatedly and are already exhausted." The civil official thought hard for a moment. Suddenly, he raised his head and said, "Sir, I heard that an imperial celestial master came to Shangda Celestial Temple a few days ago. Why not ask for help from there?" Yuan Jinping's eyes lit up. He felt that it was a good idea. He nodded slowly and said, "Let me think about it." Ever since Zhang Yan's double imparted the qi cultivation method, this method had been widely spread in the mortal world. Even though no one had been able to open their meridians and break through, those who were slightly successful had a strong physique. They could run as if they were flying. They had only cultivated for a few decades, but their strength was already comparable to that of a general in the army. Moreover, this method did not require external medicine. As long as one had perseverance and practiced hard, even if one could not enter Tao, one could at least strengthen one's body. However, this kind of hard work was not as easy as using the demon's bones and blood to cultivate. Therefore, it was not used by the aristocratic families. Instead, it was liked by some poor disciples. There were more common people who practiced it. In the past, in order to deal with demons, they had to invite soldiers to encircle and suppress them. But with this method, some of the weaker mountain demons could be dealt with by themselves. This also attracted the attention of the imperial court. They were afraid that after the common people learned the method, they would disturb the hierarchy. However, seeing that this was passed down by the Shangda Celestial Master, they did not dare to prohibit it. Thus, they bestowed the title of Celestial Master to all the double immortals and allowed them to set up temples in various places. Every year, they could pick some disciples to enter the imperial court as officials. Even though some power was given out this way, they did not have to worry about any chaos. After Yuan Jinping left the hall, he was thinking about how to ask the Celestial Master to come out and help when a subordinate came to report, "Master, eldest master is here." Yuan Jinping said happily, "Is Qing here? I am looking for him. Quickly call him in." After a while, Yuan Jinping came into the hall. He knelt down and said, "Son greets father." Yuan Jinping saw that after not seeing him for a long time, his son had become more and more handsome. His behavior was also calm. He was very pleased and said, "My son, quickly get up." After the father and son sat down, they chatted in the back hall. After talking about some trivial family matters, Yuan Jinping asked about Yuan Jingqing's purpose for coming here. Yuan Jingqing replied, "Son wants to return to the capital and go to Mount Qinghe to seek Taoism." Yuan Jinping was startled. He muttered, "Can't you wait for a few more years?" Yuan Jingqing said, "Recently, I feel that it is difficult to improve my cultivation. After thinking about it, it is time for me to enter the mountain." Yuan Jinping nodded and said, "That's good. After you finish your studies, I hope that you can be like the Celestial Master to protect the country and the people. Coincidentally, there is a matter that I need you to handle. It is suitable." Yuan Jingqing said with a serious face, "Father, please speak." Yuan Jinping told him the reason and said, "Now that the imperial court is sending troops everywhere, even if I request the heavenly army, I will have to wait for at least half a year. However, if the Celestial Master of Shangda Temple helps, I think it will not be difficult to eliminate the 7 demon kings." Yuan Jingqing thought for a while. These years, he did not shut himself away and made friends with many Taoist cultivators who practiced this art. Some of them even entered the Celestial Master's temple. He said seriously, "I will definitely pass on the message. Because this matter involved the safety of the people in the county, it should not be delayed." He decided to leave immediately. Yuan Jinping wanted to send a few family warriors to follow him, but he rejected them all. Yuan Jinping also knew that his son was different from others. Not only did he have his own ideas, but he also faintly possessed magic power. He was not too worried, so he gave him 2 good horses and ordered the servants to prepare his luggage. He personally saw him off. After bidding farewell to his father, Yuan Jinping rode the horse out of the city and headed north along the main road. The 2 horses took turns and galloped for a night. He did not feel tired, but the 2 horses were sweaty and panting. He found a clean spot by the road to rest, untied his water bag and took out some dry food to fill his stomach. In reality, he was born with the ability to absorb spiritual vigor from the outside, so he did not need water. However, after being suppressed by the talisman for more than 20 years, he was already used to it. Although he went out this time, he did not do so. After resting for a while, his head suddenly darkened. He was very vigilant. He looked up and saw a strange bird circling in the sky. "Young man, you are in big trouble." A voice came from not far away from Yuan Jinping. He turned his head and saw a sloppily dressed man, Daoren, under the shade of a tree by the road. He kept the water bag calmly and said, "Taoist, what do you mean?" Daoren said, "Just now, one of the demon kings of Qiqiao, Demon King Bodu, passed by. There is no trace of anyone within a 10-mile radius. But it is circling above your head. I'm afraid it has its eyes on you." Yuan Jinping took another look. "Is that the Demon King of Qiqiao?" The old Taoist saw that he was not panicking at all and was surprised. He took a few more looks and said, "Are you not afraid?" Yuan Jinping said confidently, "I am also half a cultivator. If that Demon King comes, even if I don't win, I can still force him to retreat." The old Taoist chuckled and said, "Cultivator? Young man, do you know that there is a difference between big and small?" Yuan Jinping said, "I have never heard of it." Daoren said slowly, "Exorcising ghosts and bewitching people is the lower Tao, calling the wind and summoning the rain is the upper Tao, maintaining one's health is the small Tao, and living a carefree life is the big Tao." Yuan Jinping nodded and said, "May I know what Tao you're cultivating?" The old Taoist laughed and said, "Of course I'm cultivating the carefree Tao." Yuan Jinping asked again, "What is the Tao of carefree? Walking in this world, can you do as you please?" Yuan Jinping thought for a while and said, "Nothing can be accomplished without rules. Even the emperor of the world cannot do as he pleases." Daoren clapped and said, "That's right. Daoren cultivates this Tao to be free and unfettered. Once he succeeds, the heavens and the earth will not care, and he can come and go as he pleases." Yuan Jinping said, "Even so, it's not like I have a lifespan of 100 years. So what if I can be carefree?" Daoren praised, "Well said. But there are still ways to live a long life in this world. One can live forever and live as long as the heavens." Yuan Jinping raised his eyebrows and said, "What a big tone." Daoren smiled and said, "If you insist on it, you are not a guest outside the door. Whether you believe it or not, it's all up to you." Yuan Jinping said, "I have a technique that can also allow you to live forever." The old Taoist priest said, "What technique?" Yuan Jinping took out a book from his bosom. The moment he took it out, the old Taoist reached out and grabbed it. The old Taoist took a few glances at it and laughed in disdain. He threw it on the ground and said, "I was wondering what kind of technique it was. So it's this little technique again. Although this technique can strengthen the muscles and bones, it's too shallow and can't be cultivated into any supernatural powers or mana." Yuan Jinping frowned and picked up the book. He patted away the dust, smoothed the wrinkles and kept it carefully. Daoren sneered and said, "I've told you that these are useless. Why did you pick it up?" Yuan Jinping didn't answer and asked, "Where can I find the wonderful art that Taoist is talking about?" Daoren instantly became spirited and said, 500 miles from here, there is a remote mountain. There is a celestial living there. His name is Enlightened Person Banyan. He is very powerful. You can go there. As long as you are sincere, you can find celestial fate." Yuan Jinping turned around and got on the horse. Looking at the direction, He was still heading north. Daoran saw this and called out to him, "You're going the wrong way. You should go south." Yuan Zhangqing said, "When did I agree to go there?" The old man's face darkened and said, "Then why are you asking me where I'm going?" Yuan Zhangqing sneered and said, "Other than the disciples of Shangda, everyone else in the world is evil. I'm asking you where you're from because I'm going to kill my way to your door in the future. I'll destroy your family, execute your disciples, destroy your scriptures and break your Tao roots. P.S. Happy New Year to everyone." Chapter 9:25. Destroy my sect and break my Taoist roots? Daoran heard such ruthless words and laughed. "You dare to say that you will destroy my Banyun sect with your cultivation without opening your meridians? You are too arrogant." Yuan Zhangqing raised his voice and said, "If I can't do it today, I will do it in the future. I am a disciple of Shangda Temple. I only need to raise my arm and call for help and there will be thousands of people who will come to help. I don't believe that I can't destroy you all." The old Taoist priest's countenance changed abruptly. Even though he was not afraid of ordinary mortals, he was rather fearful of Shangda immortal master who had been cultivating in Mount Qinghe for more than 200 years. Before he came out, his master had also reminded him not to provoke this person. It was obvious that this person's cultivation was very high. His face revealed a ruthless expression. If that was the case, then he couldn't let this person escape. He scolded, "Junior, I saw that you have an extraordinary aptitude and kindly pointed out a bright path for you. If you come under my tutelage, you will also be able to cultivate. Since you don't appreciate my kindness, I can only accept you and then kill that county officer father of yours to remove the root of this disaster." As he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and a cloud of black smoke flew out. It was filled with a murderous aura and there seemed to be the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. When Yuan Zhangqing heard that his words involved his father, he immediately had the intention to kill. Even though he had fought demons before, this was the first time he saw such a strange technique and he didn't know how to deal with it. But his character was resolute. He dared to fight with his life on the line. Instead of retreating, he pressed his legs together and the horse under him suddenly leaped forward, bringing with it a gust of wind as it charged towards the old Taoist. Daoran snorted. Even though he had been cultivating for many years, his opponent was not an ordinary scholar. If a man and a horse were to collide, he would not be able to withstand it. In fear, he dodged to the side to avoid it. When Yuan Zhangqing was about to collide with the black smoke, he immediately jumped down from the saddle. At the same time, he took out a pair of short spears from his victory hook. When he landed on the ground, he raised his hand and threw one of the spears in Doran's direction. After finishing this action, he took the short bow from his back and shot 3 arrows in a row. Then, without stopping, he held the other short spear and rushed forward with the momentum of a sprint. This series of actions was used by the elite soldiers in the army when they fought against the demons. Now that he was using it, it was also unusually fierce. After a few steps, the horse was wrapped in black smoke. There was a mournful cry. He fell to the ground, and in less than 2 or 3 breaths, his flesh and blood turned to mush, leaving behind only a pale white skeleton. However, he didn't even bother to look at it. His footsteps did not slow down at all. After Daoran dodged to the side, he blew lightly. Just as he was about to cast a spell to counterattack, the 3 arrows arrived. His expression froze. He recognized that these arrows were used by the army to kill demons. There was a strong poison on them. Even if it was a demon king, if he was shot, his muscles and bones would become weak and it would be hard for him to fight again. Therefore, he didn't dare to let it touch his body and could only dodge again. At this moment, Yuan Zhangqing took the opportunity to get close. He puffed up a gust of inner qi in his chest and blew it out. With a woo-woo sound, a strong gust of wind blew across the ground. Daoran was originally dodging, but when he was pushed by that gust of air, he instantly staggered. Yuan Zhangqing took this opportunity and leaped over. He thrust his spear forward and stabbed it right into his chest, going half a foot deep. Unexpectedly, The old Taoist let out a muffled groan and only took 2 steps back before he steadied himself. He turned his hand and grabbed the spear's body. At the same time, he raised his sleeves and looked like he was going to use his previous skill again. Yuan Jianqing tried to pull his spear back, but he couldn't. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, he reacted quickly and simply pushed the spear forward. Daoren was caught off guard and couldn't help but fall back a few steps. His movements were also messed up. Yuan Jianqing let go of the spear, and with a chong sound, he pulled out his knife and chopped down. Daoren awkwardly dodged, but his steps were messed up. He realized that he couldn't retreat anymore, or else he might die under the knife. He didn't care that his body was slanted. He raised his finger and shouted, "Go!" As soon as he said that, the hairpin on his head suddenly turned into a black light and flew out. Yuan Jianqing was shocked. If he used his knife to block the attack, he had a high chance of blocking it. But if he did that, the advantage he gained earlier would be gone. When Daoren regained his breath, he would definitely die. He gritted his teeth and allowed the black light to pierce his chest, but he still stood up straight. Daoren saw that his hair was tied up and nothing happened to him. He couldn't help but widen his eyes, as if he had seen something unbelievable. How could Yuan Jianqing let go of such a good opportunity? He shouted and swung his arms. A knife light swept across. Pu Chi, a head flew up, the headless body swayed a few times and fell to the ground. After killing Daoren, he didn't let his guard down. He retreated a dozen steps and looked up at the sky. He didn't know when, but the strange bird had disappeared. After waiting for more than 100 breaths, he didn't see any reaction from the corpse. He knew that it was dead. He relaxed and couldn't help but feel exhausted. He slowly retreated to the side of a tree and sat down. He pulled out the hairpin from his chest and reached into his bosom to take out a Taoist book. Thinking back to the battle just now, it could be said that his life was hanging by a thread. He had a lingering fear. If it wasn't for this book, he would have died. He didn't know what this book was made of, but it was not damaged after being pierced by the hairpin. He thought to himself, "This Daoren has special skills. If I didn't fight him with my life on the line, I would have died." As he was thinking, his eyes swept across the corpse. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He changed his mind and forced himself to get up. He walked forward and grabbed Daoren's clothes. He was surprised to find that his chest and arms were covered with thick white hair. "Demon?" He was shocked. He suddenly thought of something and turned his head. He didn't know when the head on the ground had turned into a bird's head. Isn't this the strange bird just now? If that's the case, that so-called perfected man Banyun might be a demon too. Because the Taoist said that the location of Half-Cloud Celestial was in the direction of the county office, he wanted to go back and inform his father. However, this might delay his business. After weighing the pros and cons, he decided to head north first. "I'll go to Mount Qinghe. This time, I must ask the Celestial Master to bestow me a wonderful technique and learn the divine skills. After I succeed, I'll share it with the people. Together with me, we'll wipe out the evil sects in this world and sweep away the evil chi in the human world. We'll return the world to a bright and peaceful world." Because he had used up too much energy, he sat down and prepared to adjust his breathing and chi to recover some of his strength before continuing on his journey. However, when he circulated his technique, he felt the chi in his body being activated. It was like a spring gushing out from the ground. It was different from the past. After an unknown period of time, his body shook. The sound of gold and jade rang in his ears. In a split second, a ray of light flew out from his body and enveloped him. Looking from afar, it was like the rising sun. At the same time, in the sky, Zhang Yan, who was meditating on the dragon carriage, sensed something. He opened his eyes and quietly observed the changes in the heavenly Tao. Finally, he smiled. The fate of this continent has been completed. It's time to leave. On the North Mountain Road of Chongping County, Yuan Jingqing had already woken up from his meditation. He felt as if he had broken free from a layer of shackles. He felt light and comfortable, as if he wanted to fly. It was as if he could fly away with the wind as soon as his feet touched the ground. He instantly knew that he had crossed the threshold. From now on, he was no longer a mortal. If I can't live forever, no matter how high my cultivation is, it's all an illusion. This time, I'm going to seek Tao. I must ask the Celestial Master to bestow me the method to live forever. After he made up his mind, he led the other horse over and hung the monkey head on the horse's head. Then, he flipped onto the horse and with a wave of his whip, he was on his way again. After running for more than 10 miles, he heard a voice in the sky. "Which family are you from? Did you kill my disciple?" Yuan Zhangqing pulled on the reins and stopped the horse. He raised his head and saw a cloud in the sky. On it sat a Taoist in hemp garments. However, this person only had the upper half of his body. From his waist down, there was nothing. At this moment, he was glaring at Yuan Zhangqing. His heart skipped a beat. Flying in the sky was very similar to the methods of the Celestials in the legends. Ever since he opened his meridians and broke through, he restrained his aura. He cupped his hands and bowed. "May I know who is the Celestial Master's disciple?" The Taoist in hemp garments looked at the bird demon's head and said angrily, "It's tied to your horse. Do you still dare to play dumb?" When Yuan Zhangqing heard this, he immediately kept his respectful words and sneered, "So you're that half-cloud immortal?" "That's right. I killed this bird demon with my own hands. Such a harmful demon should be punished. If I meet him again, I'll kill him." The Taoist in hemp garments said angrily, "How dare you? Since you killed it, you'll have to pay with your life." He was originally a disciple of Xianzhou Palace. Back then, he tailed the dragon carriage all the way here. However, when he was trying to break through the forbidden area, he was ambushed by his junior apprentice brother and fell into the sea. Luckily, he had a rare treasure with him, so he was lucky enough to survive. Later on, he encountered a monster in the sea and had his legs bitten off. Although he had survived for more than 200 years, his cultivation had been reduced by more than 10%. His temperament had also become very bad. The reason why there were so many bird demons in Chongping County was not unrelated to the fact that he had secretly passed on his skills. He had done so for the sake of the bird demon who could carry him across the sea and back to the abode of immortals once his cultivation was accomplished. The bird demon who had been killed was the one who had benefited the most from this. How could he not be furious? Just as he was about to use his mana to pull Yuan Zhangqing up, he heard a dragon's roar in the sky. Before he could react, he felt the world spinning. When he came back to his senses, he realized that he had been thrown into the sea and there were giant cliffs all around him. He was shocked and said, "Oh no, why are we here?" He knew that his junior apprentice brother had not left all these years and was now cultivating on the sea. Just as he was about to escape, he heard a surprised voice from afar. "So senior apprentice brother is not dead. Since you're here, why are you in a hurry to leave? I'll treat you well." Yuan Zhangqing knew that he could not fight against the Taoist in hemp garments and thought that it would be difficult for him to escape. However, suddenly, the person was wrapped up by a cloud and disappeared. Just as he was surprised, he saw a dragon carriage coming from the sky. A black-robed Taoist was sitting in it and there was a child standing beside him. When he looked up, the Taoist's eyes met his and he was stunned. The child stood up and said, "Yuan Zhangqing, didn't you want to go up the mountain to seek Tao? Now that your teacher is in front of you, come up and greet him." Yuan Zhangqing's body trembled as if he had just woken up from a dream. He immediately bowed and said excitedly, "Disciple greets teacher." Zhang Yan looked down and said, "Yuan Zhangqing, you were originally a spiritual plant from outside the sky. Because I accidentally fell into the mortal world, you were reincarnated as a human. You and I are considered to have karma and we need to have a master-disciple relationship. Today, I want to drive the carriage back to the mountain, but the journey is long. Are you willing to go back with me?" Yuan Zhangqing hesitated and said, "Of course I'm willing. However, I still have parents and I'm afraid that I won't be able to be filial after I'm far away." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Filial piety is the right thing to do. Since that's the case, I'll give you 2 things. He raised his hand and pointed. A golden light fell and went into the space between his eyebrows. He said, "This is a scroll of Taoist book. You can study it in detail. When you're done with filial piety, you can activate the talisman and come to Donghua to find me. Yuan Zhangqing quickly bowed and thanked him. Under his gaze, the dragon carriage rode on the clouds and gradually disappeared into the sky until it disappeared. On the ancient path on the cliff, there was only a young man standing there. He looked into the sky and did not leave for a long time. Chapter 926. Dongsheng Continent, Shenwu Mountain. At the top of Tsangzhu Peak, there was a flying hall suspended in the air. Outside, there were long corridors and pavilions suspended in the air. There were also streams and waterfalls, flowers and pine trees. The light was like ripples and rainbows gushed out. It looked like a fairyland in the clouds. At this moment, in the main hall, Fu Baoxing was sitting in the middle, wearing a feather robe and a star crown. On both sides were 23 personal disciples. Perhaps his aptitude was not the best among his peers, but he was very good at running the sect. Ever since he took charge of the sect had been renewed, and it was getting stronger day by day. The disciples sitting in front of him were all taught by him, and 7 of them had reached the 3rd tier of core transformation. He believed that in another 100 or 200 years, there would be a few more Yuanine cultivators. But at this moment, the atmosphere in the hall was solemn. Fu Baoxing said in a deep voice, "Today, I have gathered all of you here to ask for help from the Zhongtai sect." "Titan, tell them." "Yes, master." A cultivator with a square face and full of righteousness answered respectfully. This was Fu Baoxing's eldest personal disciple, Long Huaishan. He had entered the Tao for more than 300 years and was 1 step away from entering Yuaning. He was one of the few people with the highest cultivation level among this generation. He first looked at his peers, then said in a loud voice, "Last year, sect leader Qiao discussed with our sect about exterminating the remnants of Xianyu sect. But before we started, the remnants of Xianyu sect invaded Celestial City 3 days ago. Because they had the help of the Python clan, sect leader Qiao could not handle them, so he wrote a letter to ask for help from Han Yuan." On the first seat on the right, a beautiful but murderous female cultivator sat. She looked displeased and said, "Why did he come to ask for help again? Why does such a big Zhongtai sect always need me to help?" Sitting opposite her was the 2nd disciple, Ruan Gufeng. He sighed and said, "Junior sister you can't blame sect leader little Qiao for this. He is the new head of the sect and is not as prestigious as old sect leader Qiao. Moreover, there are martial uncles and martial uncles who take advantage of their seniority. Not only are they unable to order him around, they are also obstructing him everywhere. No wonder he wrote a letter asking for help." After the Zhongtai sect's previous sect master, Qiao Huanzhuan, annexed the Xianyu sect, he mixed the techniques of 1 or 2 sections. He forced the remaining disciples of the latter to go into exile at sea. However, because they had the support of the Python clan, they couldn't be completely exterminated. Now 300 or 400 years had passed. Because Qiao Huanzhuan was nearing the end of his lifespan, he had hurriedly passed on his position to his grandnephew, Qiao Sun. He went to be reincarnated. However, he didn't expect that this move would cause many people in the sect to be dissatisfied. He often agreed on the surface but opposed in secret. They were unwilling to help, giving the Xianyu sect a chance to breathe. Instead, they built another celestial city on the sea. As a result, the bizarre scene of Zhongtai being forced into a disadvantageous position appeared. The female cultivator called Junior Martial Sister, he said, "Senior Martial Brother, it's not that I'm narrow-minded and don't care about the big picture. Over the past decades, Zhongtai has asked for help several times. When did I, Han Yuan, not lend a helping hand? Last time, even the disciple I thought highly of died. If Zhongtai doesn't pull himself together, it'll just be burying my Han Yuan's disciple in vain." Ruan Gufeng also sighed. He also knew that disciple. He entered the core transformation realm after 50 years of cultivation. He could be said to be the strongest among the younger generation, but he died halfway in the last battle. It was no wonder that his junior martial sister was so resentful. The lower disciples had more or less lost disciples because of this. When they heard this, they all agreed with him and voiced their opinions. They all thought that this move was inappropriate. Long Huaishan said loudly, "Everyone listen to me. The Python clan's goal is to find a foothold in the continent. If Zhongtai falls, then I, Han Yuan, will have to face the demon clan. Are you all only willing to help when that time comes?" A disciple said disapprovingly, "Zhongtai sect has Tao Zhenren as a revered disciple. What can the Python clan do to them?" Long Huaishan said in a deep voice, "Although Tao Zhenren is a revered disciple, don't forget that the Python clan also has the old demon Luo Mengzi. The two spiritual masters are wary of each other, so why would they fight? But if Zhongtai sect is not strong enough, I'm afraid Tao Zhenren won't be able to protect them." "Junior martial sister," he said, "senior martial brother, although what you said is reasonable, the situation in the sect is different from the past. Don't tell me you want Master to fight personally?" Long Huaishan immediately fell silent. The reason why everyone was not willing to agree, other than because they cherished their disciples, was that the Hanyuan sect's power had decreased compared to the past. In the past, with the two Yuanian cultivators, Zhang Boyan and Song Chuyuan, in the sect, they would not be at a disadvantage even if they fought with the Python clan. But Zhang Boyan knew that his lifespan was coming to an end, so he had returned to the Donghua continent to reincarnate. As for Song Chuyuan, he was also at the end of his lifespan. Now, he was barely holding on to his life and was training his disciples in seclusion. He rarely showed himself. So this time, only Fu Baoxing, as the leader of a sect, could personally lead the disciples to help. At this moment, Fu Baoxing said, "We are in the Dongxing North Continent with Zhongtai sect. Behind us are the three sects, and in front of us is the Python clan. Only by working together can we have a foothold here. Both sects are bound together for good or bad. Whether we are willing or not, we need each other's help." He was everyone's master and also the leader of a sect. Since he said this, the disciples did not dare to have any objections. They all agreed. Fu Baoxing smiled and said, "Don't worry. I have already asked for help from the upper sect. Your two uncle masters have already agreed to help." When the disciples heard this, they could not help but let out a sigh of relief. All these years, the Python clan had repeatedly attacked Zhongtai sect, but they had never come to the Shenwu mountain. This was because the Hanyuan sect was backed by the Qinsong upper sect. Since there were people from the sect coming, then their previous worries were nothing. So they said, "We will listen to Master's orders." Fu Baoxing said, "Go back and make your own preparations. In a month's time at the latest, go with me to help Zhongtai sect." The 23 personal disciples stood up, bowed, and accepted the order. After Fu Baoxing finished his instructions, he waved his hand and dismissed the disciples, leaving only Long Huaishan behind. He called him to the rear hall and said, "Recently, the attacks on the Python clan are getting stronger and stronger. They seem to want to occupy a piece of land before the calamity. I think that the more it is so, the more we cannot let them get what they want. Not long ago, General Lu on the Sea found out that the Python clan's elder Luo Qiuhong will be heading to Xianyu Immortal City next month as a guest. But in actual fact, it is to guard the path of retreat, so that they can attack Zhongtai Immortal City with full force. I intend to take this chance to mobilize the disciples to ambush and kill him, cutting off one of the Python clan's arms. Then my Hanyuan sect will be temporarily stable." Long Huaishan was shocked and said, "Master, that Luo Qiuhong is a third-stage realm cultivator. He is Grandmaster. I'm afraid it will not be easy to deal with him." Fu Baoxing said in a deep voice, "I know how powerful he is, so I will invite Senior Ruren to go with me, and invite the million people of the Lu family to follow. When the time comes, we will set up a large array, and your junior brothers and sisters will guard the array, gathering the power of the clan to kill this demon." He was very clear. The Python clan had many worries now. They were not too brazen, but if this carried on, the calamity would be nearing and they would not be able to hold it in. Since there would be a battle sooner or later. Rather than sit and wait, why not take the initiative to attack? Long Huaishan had some confidence and said, "If we have the help of two senior uncles, there is a huge possibility that we can kill this demon." Fu Baoxing shook his head. Although your two senior uncles have agreed to rush over to help, but the two continents are extremely far apart, they might not be able to rush over in time. When Long Huaishan heard this, he could not help but feel anxious. Fu Baoxing said, even though I am confident, it is hard to predict good or bad luck in a battle of sorcery. As the eldest disciple of the sect, you need to guard the sect. If I do not return, you will take over as the sect leader and guard the sect. In the future, your grandmaster will be in charge. Long Huaishan said guiltily, I am useless. If my cultivation was a little deeper, I would be able to share master's burden. Fu Baoxing just smiled and gave a few more reminders before ordering him to leave. He returned to the back hall to meditate in seclusion, waiting for the time to come. Soon a month passed. He came out of the temple and looked at the ocean. However, after waiting for a few days, he did not see anyone coming. On this day, Long Huaishan came to report, Master, sect leader Qiao has sent a letter. 2 celestial cities on the continent are under attack, asking for our clan's assistance. Fu Baoxing said calmly, got it? At this time, he was actually calm. As long as this plan succeeded and the Python tribe was heavily injured, the situation in the North Continent could be reversed. No matter how much Xianyu stole, he could make them spit it out in the future. However, after waiting for another half a day, there was still no sign of anyone on the ocean. At this time, Long Huaishan came to report again, Master, General Lu has sent a letter. Luo Qiuhong has brought more than 200 troops and is heading to Xianyu Sect's celestial city on the sea. Fu Baoxing sighed. Although he had expected it, he still felt that it was a pity. Wang Kaiwei had the Yin Killer Blade in hand, coupled with the Array Formation and Dragon Carp Renren, it was very likely that she could kill him. Now, to be safe, he could only think of another way, so he said, invite Elder Song here. Not long after, Song Chuyuan arrived on the astral wind. After landing, he cupped his hands and said, Greetings, sect leader Fu. Fu Baoxing looked at him and saw that his hair was already white. After all, his lifespan was coming to an end, and his cultivation was also gradually dissipating. He solemnly cupped his hands and said, 2 of my fellow disciples have not arrived yet. This time, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble Elder Song to help. Song Chuyuan said, Sect leader Fu, you're too kind. You found me a disciple, and my corpse cult has a successor. My wish has been fulfilled, and I can reincarnate with peace of mind. Before I die, why don't I do something for the sect? Fu Baoxing nodded repeatedly. Although Song Chuyuan's cultivation was not as good as before, he had the lifeless treasure coffin in hand. This was once the corpse cult's treasure, and it was extremely powerful. Back then, if he had not relied on this item to escape death, he would probably have died in the battle in the Devil's Cave like Tang Jin. And with the help of this treasure, even the Yin Killer Blade was not small. Beside him, Long Huaishan said, Master, the junior brothers and sisters have arrived. Fu Baoxing replied, but just as he was about to call for his disciple and fly out to the sea, he suddenly heard the sound of landslides and tsunamis coming from behind him. He was startled and turned around to look, only to see that the sea was raging with violent winds and waves, and it was as if it was going to overturn the earth and shake the sky. Song Yuanchu's expression also changed. Even if the Yuanian cultivators went up rashly, they would not be able to withstand this kind of wind and waves. Fu Baoxing stared blankly for a long time. This kind of wind and waves came out of nowhere, and there were no signs beforehand, but it still had such power. There must be a powerful person behind it. And in the northern lands, the only person with such a cultivation base was the old demon Luo Mengzi. He must have sensed that someone was going to harm his people, and that was why he did this. He originally thought that the people from the heavenly abode would not do anything due to their status, and that they had scruples about the Qinsong school behind him. But he never thought that there was no need for them to do anything at all. Just a huge wave would be enough to stop them on the shore, and all the previous plans and arrangements would be in vain. He felt the drops of water on his face and slowly closed his eyes. He let out a long sigh. Master, your disciple has tried his best. But at this moment he suddenly heard a loud rumble, as if the heaven and earth were shaking. His body shook, and he opened his eyes to look only to see a strange scene. A huge hand that almost covered the sky descended from the sky, wrapped in boundless astral currents, and pressed down the surging waves. Floating astronomy. Chapter 9:27. Fu Baoxing couldn't help but be shocked when he saw the huge waves being calmed by a single palm. The person who used this technique had unbelievably high magic power. Needless to say, the other party must be a grotto heaven cultivator. He looked up and saw that behind the huge hand that seemed to support the sky, there was an obscure chaos. It was as if it was covered by thick fog, making it difficult to see what was behind it. He thought to himself, could it be that Tao Jinren is here? Thinking about it carefully, it was highly possible. The few grotto heaven cultivators of the South Continent were eager for the two sects to fight with the Python tribe so that they could reap the benefits. They wouldn't come to help. However, the technique in front of him was very similar to the mysterious yellow dragon capturing palm. Other than Tao Jinren, he couldn't think of anyone else. The disciples of the Deep Abyss sect looked at the monstrous power, and their hearts were filled with fear. Their cultivation was not considered weak among the cultivators in the world, but in the face of the power of this magical power that was close to the Wali of heaven and earth, they were like sand and dust. The person who stirred the waves seemed to not want to fight with the person who came. Once the waves were suppressed, the person stopped attacking and the wind and clouds also calmed down. At this moment, the clouds in the skies slowly parted, and a handsome black-robed Taoist could be seen in midair. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and below him was a mass of chaotic black fog. It was vast and indistinct, shapeless and formless, as if it was mixed in between heaven and earth. When Fu Baoxing saw the person who came, his body couldn't help but tremble. He slowly knelt down and kowtowed respectfully, saying with a trembling voice, "Disciple Fu Baoxing greets Master and wishes Master a long life." When Long Huaishan and the 22 disciples heard this, they realized that the person in front of them was their grandmaster. They hurriedly knelt down and said in unison, "Disciples of the Deep Abyss sect greets Grandmaster and wishes Grandmaster a long life." Zhang Yan looked down and nodded, saying, "Get up." Fu Baoxing kowtowed again before he stood up and said, "Disciple did not know that benefactor would arrive and was unable to welcome you from afar. Please punish me, benefactor." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I also sensed the change in this world, so I used my magic power to teleport here. That Luo Mingze is playing tricks in front of my door. Perhaps he had to go and meet them for a while. Whatever you want to do, just do it. There's no need to care about anything else." With that said, he waved his sleeve. There was a loud bang. The black mist in the sky rose again. It surged towards the surface of the sea. Fu Baoxing hurriedly bowed to send him off. After a long time, Long Huaishan asked cautiously, "Master, has Grandmaster entered the Grotto Heaven realm?" Fu Baoxing turned around. Seeing the looks of anticipation on the faces of his disciples, he nodded his head. When the disciples saw this, their faces were filled with indescribable excitement. A Taoist heavenly abode could decide the rise and fall of a sect. Their own Grandmaster was a Taoist heavenly abode, which meant that he could go anywhere in the world. Apart from those enemies of life and death, few people would dare to make things difficult for him. His future path of cultivation would be much wider than that of others. Fu Baoxing looked calm on the surface, but his heart was actually very excited. However, there was still something to do, so it was not the time to be happy. He suppressed his emotions and said, "With Master's appearance, Luo Mingze should have no time to care about other things. This is a rare opportunity. Pass down my order. The disciples of the Deep Abyss sect will follow me to kill the Python tribe's elder, Luo Chihong." All the disciples agreed, and their voices soared into the sky. In the Deep Abyss sect, streaks of light flew up from the cliff and gathered in one place, flying towards Xianyu Immortal City. When Zhang Yan arrived at the surface of the sea, he used his magic power to teleport. In just an instant he arrived on the island where the Python tribe was entrenched. The place where the Python tribe was entrenched was originally the palace of the celestial Civ sect. After hundreds of years of operation, They moved mountains and built land. They had already opened up thousands of small and large islands, scattered all over the sea. There were also formations and restrictions connecting each other. Not only were there members of the Python tribe, but there were also many sea demons who heard of their prestige and came from afar to attach themselves to them. Now, there were no less than 1,000,000 of them, and their momentum was also very strong. He took a look and gently shook his sleeve. In an instant, the sky darkened, and the sun and moon disappeared. In the sky, there was a cloud of black fog rolling, spreading for thousands of miles. Within it, there was dense thunder and lightning flashed back and forth. Demon cultivators were most afraid of thunder. Seeing this scene, it was like the arrival of a heavenly tribulation, and all of them trembled. Taoist heavenly abode, Qinsong Zhang Yan is here to visit, please come out for a while. This voice spread far and wide, and could be heard by the land and sea. Taoist heavenly abode, it's actually a Taoist heavenly abode. The people below panicked, and the few elders of the Python tribe were so shocked that their faces turned pale. To be able to create such a world-changing scene, only Taoist heavenly abode could do it. After a moment, they heard a voice on the island, and it also spread for thousands of miles. Taoist Zhang is a guest from afar, so I will naturally come out to welcome you. After a short while, they saw black smoke rising from the island, and it went straight into the sky like a tornado. From it, a middle-aged Taoist wearing a wide robe came out. This person's long eyebrows were raised, and his beard fluttered in front of his chest. His face was handsome, and he was the Python tribe's old ancestor, Luo Mengzi, whom they had met once before. He came up to greet Zhang Yan and said, I didn't expect that after hundreds of years, Taoist Zhang is indeed one of us. As expected of the rare genius that Qinsong sees in thousands of years. Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said, Taoist heavenly abode, you flatter me. I don't think I'm a genius, but sometimes I dare to fight. Luo Mengzi was about to speak again, but at this moment, he suddenly frowned, as if he felt something was wrong. He said, Taoist Zhang, you are the Shangjin of the Qinsong School's Duzhen Hall, why are you making things difficult for a junior? Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, I don't dare. Taoist Jinren respected me before, so I should return the favor. This is etiquette. Luo Mengzi snorted, and a hint of anger rose in his heart. Although he tried his best to avoid fighting with the Taoist heavenly abode, he was blocked in front of the door, and he couldn't save his own people. If he didn't do something, not only would he lose face, he was afraid that anyone would dare to bully him in the future. He raised his hand and pointed to the sky and said, Since Taoist Zhang is interested, then I will accompany you. However, I can't stretch my limbs here, why don't we go outside the heavens? Zhang Yan smiled and said, Sure. The two of them looked at each other and leaped up into the sky. In an instant, two vast streams of clear water shot up into the clouds. Outside the second heaven, Luo Mengzi stopped in his tracks. He said, Taoist Zhang, sorry. His body swayed, and with a rumbling sound, a Dharma idol rose from behind him. Endless black clouds spread out and filled the air, covering a radius of more than 3,000 miles. A horned, black-scaled serpent slithered back and forth in the clouds, stirring up lightning from time to time. There were also thousands of golden snakes following the clouds, looking extremely ferocious. Zhang Yan smiled. Luo Mengzi was indeed called an old demon. On the surface, he spoke politely, but at this moment, he didn't show any mercy in the battle. One must know that once a cultivator entered the grotto heaven, they would become a breath of essence. This breath was formed from the cultivator's cultivation, mana, and true essence. It was the foundation of the grotto heaven cultivators. The essence would not be extinguished. The cultivation would not be reduced. The mana would not be reduced, and life would not be lost. If the essence disappeared, not only would one's cultivation be unable to advance, it might even disappear. When one used their mana, they would need to rely on this energy. If they used up too much, they would have to carefully replenish it. In other words, the more essence one had, the stronger one's mana and abilities would be. If one wanted to maintain this energy, they could only rely on the spiritual cave to support it. Because of this, if normal people didn't have a spiritual cave, it would be hard for their cultivation to increase, and it would be hard for their abilities to be displayed. Luo Mengzi was taking advantage of the fact that he had just entered the grotto heaven and his essence energy was still weak. He wanted to use his dharma to suppress him. Zhang Yan looked at the python charging at him, but he didn't fear it at all. The essence energy might be treasured by other grotto heaven cultivators and they wouldn't dare to waste it. However, he was different. He had reached the Tao and didn't have such worries. To him, this place was a spiritual cave. With a thought, he displayed his dharma. In an instant, a ball of Shen mist rose up and spread for 10,000 miles. It headed forward without retreating at all. Anglong. In the sky above the entire Dongsheng continent, there was a loud noise that sounded like it was splitting the sky. Even though they were fighting outside the heavens, the cultivators in the continent felt their minds shaking and their spiritual opportunity almost couldn't be controlled. After a while, there were countless gales, lightning, snow, and hail in the sky. In an instant, the four seasons were in chaos, and it was hard to tell the difference between day and night. At this moment, the expressions of the three grotto heavens people who were sitting in the south continent changed. They couldn't sit still anymore and flew into the sky. Fengxiang Sek's grotto heavens gone shouting's expression was ugly. How can the two of you fight here? If this goes on, it will ruin Dongsheng's spiritual opportunity. He cupped his hands at the other two grotto heavens Jinren and said, "Why don't the two of you go with me to persuade them?" The other two nodded in agreement. If the grotto heavens Jinren didn't care and attacked, it would turn the world upside down and the continent would collapse. This was their place of cultivation, and they didn't want people to mess around like this. Although Zhang Yan and Luo Mengzi were still fighting above the clouds, if they really fought, it would be hard to deal with. The three of them also flew above the heavens, but they didn't dare to get too close. They just raised their eyes and looked into the distance. They were afraid that if they went forward rashly, they would cause the other party to misunderstand and get involved. If that happened, it would be hard to clean up. At this moment, they were shocked to find that the python's scales had fallen off, and half of the horns on its head were broken. It looked a little pathetic. On the other hand, the black fog was getting stronger, and it looked like it was going to wrap around it. Gon Shouting was afraid that if the fight continued, he would persuade them again, so he quickly said loudly, "Jinren, please calm down. It's not easy for us to cultivate, and it won't benefit anyone if we continue to fight like this. We'll let others take advantage of us, don't you think so?" As if his words were effective, the python's dharma shook and returned to its original appearance. It then retracted, and Luo Mengzi's figure appeared. He said solemnly, "What do you say, Jinren Zhang?" Just now, he had underestimated Zhang Yan's ability and lost the game. Although he knew that if he continued to fight, he would not necessarily lose, but if he continued to pester Zhang Yan, he would be looked down upon by his fellow Taoists. Now that he had a way out, he simply stopped. Zhang Yan also slowly retracted his dharma and smiled. "I have no objections." He had achieved his goal today, so he naturally stopped while he was ahead. It wasn't easy to kill a grotto heaven's Jinren, especially after reaching the second level of grotto heaven. Those with profound magic power could open up a grotto heaven, and if they couldn't defeat their opponent, they could hide inside. Let's not talk about this. Once he falls into a dead end, he can still collapse the continent and make all living beings accompany him in death. Even though he can be unharmed, he may not be able to protect his disciples. Until the time comes to shed all pretense of cordiality, he is not prepared to force him into a dead end. Chapter 928. Above the outer sea of Dongsheng continent, the million demons of the Lu clan had already formed the Sixth Return Formation. The 23 disciples of the Deep Abyss School were guarding the eyes of the formation. They gathered the chi of the formation, turned it into lightning, and struck the Python clan in the formation. Luo Qiuhong was extremely shocked and furious as well. At first, when Fu Baoxing and Song Chuyuan came to challenge him, not only was he not shocked, he was instead secretly delighted in his heart. He even intended to eliminate these two nascent soul realm cultivators from the Deep Abyss sect in one battle and sweep away the obstacles for the Python tribe to get on the mainland. However, when he activated the Heaven and Earth Lock technique, Dragon Carp, who was hiding at the side, used her mana to neutralize it. Then she, Fu Baoxing and Song Chuyuan held him back. When he realized something was wrong, he was already trapped by the formation. It was difficult for him to escape. Seeing the clansmen around him being killed one by the thunder fire, fear rose in his heart. If he didn't break out, it was very likely that he would follow in their footsteps. Thus, he threatened, Fu Baoxing, if you dare to kill the disciples of my Python clan, will the ancestor let you go? Fu Baoxing was unmoved. This was just a fight between the younger generation. The people of the heavenly abode would not interfere. Blocking them like before was already the limit. If he fought personally, then the Qinsong school behind him would not be a decoration. Moreover, with his master, there was no need for him to worry. So, he ignored them and said, Disciples of the Deep Abyss school, don't be stingy with your mana. Kill this demon with all your might. The 23 disciples agreed in unison. They took out the medicinal pellets they had prepared and consumed them. Then, they increased the power of the formation. Just like that, the lightning in the formation became even more violent, like a downpour. Luo Qiuhong took off his cloak and threw it in the air. He then chanted a spell, and the cloak grew bigger and bigger until it covered him and his people. Demon General Lu Changsu was on the altar with Fu Baoxing. He watched for a while and suggested, Sect Leader Fu, this old demon is not easy to deal with. He is also a demon from the Python clan. He must have brought some powerful protective treasures with him, but I don't see him using them. He must still be thinking of breaking out of the formation. This lowly demon thinks that it's better to keep his disciples and grand-disciples alive so that they can hold him back. Fu Baoxing nodded repeatedly and said, General Lu is right. I was negligent. Even if those little demons escaped, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. On the contrary, keeping them around will make it impossible for the demon to escape. He immediately accepted this suggestion. Then they spread the news on the altar. When the disciples received the order, they immediately shifted all the pressure onto Luo Qiuhong, while the rest of the small demons only surrounded him. But he didn't kill him. Luo Qiuhong was in the middle of the formation, so it was difficult for him to notice such a change. He thought that it was because of his family's defense. However, he had to split his attention to take care of the younger generation while resisting the invasion of the formation's qi. His transcendence energy was greatly depleted, so it did not take long for him to feel exhausted. He couldn't be bothered to hide his trump card anymore. He opened his mouth and spat out a blood-red pearl. The moment the blood qi from the pearl came into contact with it, it was immediately stripped away layer by layer. When Fu Baoxing saw it, he exclaimed in surprise, 5 confusion dust beads. Disciples, be careful of your defense. At the same time, he felt fortunate and thought to himself, luckily I trapped this demon here, or else Zhongtai would be in danger this time. The 5 confusion dust beads were not some ultimate treasure. Any cultivator could use it as a sacrificial offering if they had enough precious materials. The power of this item was that it could be dispersed and combined at will. When dispersed, it could infiltrate the formation and contaminate the spiritual vigor. However, if the filthy qi gathered at one place and poured out in an instant, it would have the power to break the formation. The Python demon must have brought this item with him to break the formation of Zhongtai Immortal City. Lu Changsu saw that the formation was dissipating under the pearl, and it seemed like it could not be stopped. She said, Sect Master Fu, why don't I go down and help the Erlangs? Fu Baoxing shook his head and said, There's no hurry. I wanted to find a chance to kill this demon, but now it has come to me. There was a saying in the common military, surround 3 to 1. Although he did not purposely let it go, the principle was the same. This demon saw that there was a way out and would only run away without a care in the world. Instead, it would lose its will to fight. Then their chance would come. He turned around and bowed to Song Chuyuan, who was standing at the side, and said, Thank you, Zhenren Song. Song Chuyuan did not dare to say anything. He took out the corpse cult's treasure, the lifeless treasure coffin, and threw it into the sky. The coffin emitted endless black smoke out of thin air, which then turned into chains. With a clanging sound, it went towards Luo Qiuhong. When this treasure was in good condition, it should be able to circle the sky and lock down the 4 directions. Now, it could only lock down one place, but it was enough to deal with this big demon who only cared about rushing in. Luo Qiuhong saw that the smoke chains were closing in. If he retreated, then the formation qi that was previously broken would definitely recover. He hesitated for a moment, then activated his protective light, allowing the chains to come down and trap him, but he still desperately tried to drill forward. However, not long after, he felt his whole body go limp. The true essence in his body was being sucked out bit by bit. However, this thing was strange. He immediately roared and changed his original form, turning into a giant black-scaled python that was hundreds of feet long, and slammed forward again. With a bang, a small corner of the formation was broken by him, and half of his body came out. He was about to escape. Fu Baoxing, however, was not in a hurry. This formation was a living formation. As long as he could stall this demon for a moment, he could trap it again. Sure enough, Luo Qiuhong struggled a few times, but he could not completely escape. However, with this delay, the formation gradually closed up again. Fu Baoxing saw the opportunity. With a sword sign in his hand, he activated Thousand Snatches sword qi, borrowing the mystery of the formation and pointed forward. Where the sword light passed, the python's head was immediately cut off. The disciples were overjoyed, and they could not help but feel relieved. However, Fu Baoxing felt that the sword did not have the slightest qi, so he immediately knew something was wrong. He said, "Don't let your guard down." As soon as he finished speaking, the python exploded, and its flesh and blood scattered everywhere, forcing the formation qi away. At the same time, a red light flew out, and a voice said, "Fu Baoxing, I will definitely take revenge in the future." Lu Changsu said, "Oh no, it's his avatar that escaped." Fu Baoxing frowned, and he was about to fly out to kill it. However, right at this moment, a ray of gray light suddenly flew out of nowhere and sliced the red light into 2. Then, the gray qi stirred again and completely wiped out the red light. Fu Baoxing was a little surprised. The gray gas dispersed, and an elegant woman in a light white dress came out. She looked like a jade lotus, and she stood on the strong wind. When he saw her, he could not help but be overjoyed. He bowed and said, "Thank you for your help, third senior sister." Wang Kaiwei said, "You don't have to be so polite." At that moment, a woman in a red dress came out from behind her. She snorted and pretended to be unhappy. "Junior brother, you thanked me, but why didn't you thank me? To think that I always looked after you in the past." Fu Baoxing quickly bowed again and said, "So fourth senior sister is here too. Please forgive me for not seeing you." Wang Kaiwei tugged at her sister's sleeve and rebuked, "Sister, you should change your habit of teasing people. Junior brother Fu is now a sect master. You should take care of him in front of others." Wang Kading giggled and said, "Sister is right." Wang Kaiwei said apologetically, "Junior brother Fu, when I came with sister, we encountered a few carp demons. We were afraid that business would get out of hand. Therefore, we took a detour. However, we were late. May I know if we delayed your business?" Fu Baoxing said, "Senior sister is being too serious. If not for the 2 senior sisters, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. If not for the 2 of you, I would have had to spend some effort today. However, since the 2 of you are here, there is something I need to tell you." Wang Kaiwei saw his serious look and stopped smiling. She asked, "Junior brother, please speak." Fu Baoxing cupped his hands towards the north and said, "Benefactor's Dharma carriage is here." Wang Kaiwei was pleasantly surprised. "My teacher is with you?" Wang Kading also widened her beautiful eyes. Fu Baoxing said seriously, "Yes." Wang Kaiwei calmed herself down and said, "Since Master is here, sister, we need to go and greet him as soon as possible." Fu Baoxing said, "Master is probably fighting with old Monster Luo on the sea right now." "Master is fighting with old Monster Luo?" The 2 girls were shocked and immediately came to their senses. Wang Kaiwei said with a trembling voice, Master has become a grotto heaven? Wang Kating muttered to herself, Yes, yes. She grabbed Wang Caiwei's arm and shook it hard. Sister, do you remember the noise on the sea just now? I think Master is fighting with old monster Luo. Wang Kaiwei was worried and said, Luo Mingze is a powerful demon who has cultivated for more than 2,000 years. I wonder if Master can defeat him? Fu Baoxing called the younger disciples up and greeted the two girls one by one. He then said, The sea is not a good place to talk. Senior sisters, why don't you follow me back to the mountain first? The two sisters had no objections. They worked together and returned to Tsangju Peak after traveling for half a day. However, after waiting for 6 days, Zhang Yan did not return for a long time. Everyone could not help but worry. On the 7th day, a stream of chaotic mystic qi crossed the sea from the horizon and almost covered the sky. Fu Baoxing knew that Zhang Yan had returned and quickly led all the disciples out to welcome him. After Zhang Yan forced Luo Mingze to retreat, he accepted the invitation of the 3 grotto heavens of the 3 southern sects and rode on a ritual implement to discuss Tao beyond the sky. That was why he was delayed for a few days. After receiving the greetings of many juniors outside the mountain, he entered the main hall and sat down. Seeing that the Wang sisters were also there, he asked about the current situation in Donghua. Wang Kaiwei said, Master, after you left, there were not many changes in the continent. However, not long ago, there was a leak of spiritual vigor from a crypt in the continent. It was in the south, and the only sect that was close to it was Yu Xiao's. I'm afraid that our Xuanma and Xuanma families will fight again soon. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. With his current cultivation, although the battle of the demonic crypt was intense, it was not a big deal to him. He was happy to win and not worried about losing. There was only the last trial. Just now was the time to determine the winner. He asked a few more questions and learned that Qi Yuntian had already formed a grotto heaven. He could not help but exclaim, Senior Brother Qi's cultivation base is outstanding among your peers. Forming a grotto heaven is only a matter of time. He looked at Fu Baoxing and said gently, Disciple, you have been guarding the cult of Deep Abyss for 300 years. Are you willing to follow me back to Donghua? When Fu Baoxing heard this, he could not help but hesitate. Of course, he was willing. Not only could he get guidance from his master, but he could also cultivate in the grotto heaven. It was much better than managing the affairs of the sect in Dongsheng continent every day. However, after thinking about it, he realized that Song Chuyuan would be reincarnated soon. He was the only Yuanian cultivator in the cult of Deep Abyss to support the overall situation. If he went just like that, it would be difficult to guard the sect. The prosperity of the sect was the result of hundreds of years of hard work. It was not something that could be abandoned easily. He could only say, Master, I'm afraid I can't leave. Zhang Yan smiled and said in a meaningful tone, I know what you are thinking. There's no harm in it. When you are done with your worldly affairs, throw away your worries, that will be the time you enter the sect. Chapter 929. Zhang Yan stayed in East Victory for half a month and taught the disciples of Han Yuan sect many important cultivation techniques. Then, under Fu Baoxing's respectful farewell, he brought the Wang sisters and left the continent on the dragon carriage. If he traveled at his usual speed, it would take at least a few months to return to Donghua. However, with the help of his dermic powers, the carriage did not descend from the lightning and stars. In just over 10 days, it had reached the far sea of the East Ocean. Seeing that it would not take more than half a day to reach the territory of the Clear Feather sect, he thought about how he had been taken care of by Tao Zhenren previously. Since he was passing by, he decided to pay a visit. He raised his hand and pointed, conjuring a talisman book. Zhang Chan, take my book and go to the Clear Feather sect. The people of the grotto heaven walked with great momentum. If they did not conceal it, it would be like lighting a fire in the dark. It would not be difficult for cultivators of the same generation to notice. It was just out of etiquette to pass the message. Zhang Chan took the book, bowed, and escaped with a gust of wind. However, he didn't go far when he saw a huge golden river in the clouds. He didn't find it strange, but when he looked carefully, he saw that there were countless golden carps swimming in it. They were heading in the same direction as him. He turned his eyes and shouted at one of the golden carps, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." The golden carp looked at him in confusion. It turned around and turned into a charming woman. She asked, "Fellow Taoist, what can I do for you?" Zhang Chan bowed and asked, "I passed by this place and saw your great momentum. I wonder where you are going?" The woman did not seem to be scheming. She said honestly, "My king found a good spiritual field in the sea. He wants to occupy it first so that the Xian family won't get it." Zhang Chan said, "Is your king Patriarch Chu?" The woman covered her mouth and smiled. She said, "I don't have that blessing." Soon after, he realized that these words seemed to be belittling his master, so he hurriedly restrained his expression and said, "My king is one of the 100 grandchildren of the ancestor, and he's called Immortal Yitong. He likes to make friends with people of the same Tao. If fellow Taoist is interested in joining him, I can introduce you to him." Zhang Chan asked a few more questions and understood that once the Carp tribe's royal grandson reached the Yuanying stage, he would be able to break through to the Yuanying stage. He needed to bring his family members to open the mansion, sit and guard a region. In the hundreds of years since he came to the sea, he had already occupied many places where spiritual opportunity flourished. He asked doubtfully, "I heard that there are 2 clans here, Chongyue and Qingyu, and they aren't our demonic cultivators. Could it be that they're allowing your clan to take whatever they want?" The woman said, "So fellow Taoist didn't know. Mi Zhenren of the Chongyuezhen temple was nearing the end of his lifespan. How would he dare to come out at this time?" As for the Clear Feather sect, although Tao Zhenhong was quite capable, his disciples were not. "How can you compete with my Carp tribe?" When she mentioned the Clear Feather sect, her tone was filled with disdain. Zhang Chan conversed with the woman for a while more and got a token from her. Then, he found an excuse to leave and took a big detour to avoid the Carp tide before heading to the Clear Feather sect. Previously, he had followed Zhang Yan to this place. Based on his memory, he realized that after flying for a long time, he kept circling around a reef. He knew that he had entered a formation, so he didn't dare to move around recklessly anymore. He only shouted, "Is there any Taoist from the Clear Feather sect here? I'm here on the order of Immortal Zhang of Qinsong to deliver the visiting card." Not long after he said that, the sea suddenly parted, and a young cultivator came out with a puff of smoke. He looked at Zhang Chan suspiciously and said, "Are you from the Qinsong school? Please wait for a moment, I'll send a talisman to report to the sect." At this moment, a voice came from behind him. "There's no need. Just give me the book." The young cultivator turned around and saw a middle-aged Taoist holding a horsetail whisk behind him. He hurriedly bowed and greeted, "Martial uncle." The middle-aged Taoist nodded and took the book. "Since it's a letter from Immortal Zhang, I'll personally deliver it to the sect master." Zhang Chan also said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, Taoist. I can go back and report to the sect master now." The middle-aged Taoist's mouth moved, and he passed a formation incantation to him. "Fly according to this incantation, and Taoist will be able to leave this formation. It's just that Carp Demon has been causing trouble everywhere recently, and the sea isn't too safe. Please be careful when you travel." Zhang Chan thanked him and followed the incantation to get out of the formation. He returned the way he came. Although he met a few patrolling demon cultivators along the way, with the token in hand, there were no more obstacles along the way. Not long after, he returned to the Flood Dragon's carriage. He reported what he saw and said, "Master, I see that Clear Feather sect is about to be bullied by the Carp tribe. I'm afraid the situation isn't good." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Only when the predecessors plant the trees can the descendants enjoy the shade. Tao Zhenren is the one who planted the trees. Chongyue True Temple has been established for thousands of years, and its foundation is deep. The Python tribe has a lot of people, and they're born with the Water tribe. It won't be easy for them to snatch the spiritual opportunity from these 2 tribes. Don't use the current situation to determine victory or defeat. After a few hundred years, we'll see who wins. Wang Kating whispered, Sister thinks that after a few hundred years, Clear Feather Sect will be the winner. Wang Kaiwei was surprised. Sister, how dare you say that? Wang Kating said proudly, Tao Zhenren's lifespan is less than 1,000 years. The two Chongyue True Temples Mi Zhenren and the Carp Tribe's old demon Chu are both more than 2,000 years old. If we wait any longer, the winner will be Clear Feather Sect. When Zhang Yan heard their conversation, he just shook his head and smiled. On the surface, as long as Clear Feather Sect endured for a while, they would be able to get out of their predicament after a few hundred years. However, how could the two spiritual masters not see this? They would definitely make arrangements early. If that happened, they would either have to relocate their sect or go through with it. Moreover, one must not forget that the 9 continents were still in the midst of a great tribulation. The last tribulation was even more dangerous. Even the people from the heavenly abode would not be able to do anything about it. If Clear Feather Sect could get through it, they would naturally turn into butterflies. If they couldn't, they would be in danger of being destroyed. At this moment, in Clear Feather Sect, Tao Zhenren had already received Zhang Yan's letter. He summoned his 4th disciple, Yang Lin, and said, Qinsong School's spiritual master Zhang is visiting our sect. Pass down my order. Open the mountain gate, and I will personally welcome him. Yang Lin said, Master is the leader of a sect, so it's not good to act rashly. Why don't I go and welcome him? Tao Zhenren shook his head and said, Fellow Taoist Zhang is now one of us, and he's also in charge of Qinsong School's Duzhen Palace, so he deserves this greeting. Yang Lin's heart trembled and he said in disbelief, Spiritual Master Zhang, could it be that you've formed a heavenly abode? Tao Zhenren nodded slowly. He was also deeply moved, and he thought to himself, Fellow Taoist Zhang has formed a heavenly abode after cultivating for 500 years. Since ancient times, there has never been anyone who can surpass him in our 9 continents. Yang Lin forced himself to calm down. He stood up and said, Disciple will make arrangements now. Not long after, Clear Feather Sect's Mountain Gate's restrictive formation was opened. On both sides of the Tao path, maids rode cranes forward, and the steps were lined up to welcome them. There was even a cover of brilliant clouds, and celestial lamps were raised high. Golden threads and silver flowers weaved the Tao of brocade clouds. After a while, Sect Master Tao Zhenhong led the disciples out on the palace boat. For a moment, clear air covered the sun, and clouds moved with the wind. When he saw a flood dragon carriage coming over, he stood up first and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist Zhang, long time no see. Why don't you come on the boat? Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said with a smile, Since it's Master's invitation, how would I dare to decline? He came out of the flood dragon carriage, rode the wind, and sat on the palace boat. He looked around and saw that even though the number of Clear Feather Sect disciples had increased by more than 10 times, as far as he could see, there was only one Yuanying cultivator, Yang Lin. Zhao Jingqing and Wang Yingfang were nowhere to be seen. There had never been a reason for a disciple to stay away when a master came out to welcome a guest. Calculating the years, the two of them had most likely reached the end of their lifespan and reincarnated. There was no successor among the younger generation, so it was no wonder that they were suppressed by the other 2 sections. Tao Zhenren saw that Zhang Yan was paying attention to the disciples, so he said, Our Clear Feather Sect has only been established for a short time, and there are few who can take charge. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said with a smile, Tao Zhenren, it's hard to get here today. Why don't you invite me Zhenren and Demon Lord Chu over for a chat? When Tao Zhenren heard this, his expression changed slightly. He thought for a while and sighed. I owe you another favor. It was true that he was a heavenly abode master, but after rebelling against the Southflower sect, he was isolated on the ocean without the support of a sect. This meant that unless it was a matter of life and death, he could not act rashly. In the past, when he helped Zhang Yan many times, he also had the intention of befriending Qinsong. Today, however, Zhang Yan's identity was very different. He was originally the side hall master of Qinsong School's Duzhen Hall. Now that he had achieved a heavenly abode, he would definitely take the position of the main hall when he returned. This position was not to be underestimated. In terms of authority, it was only below the Qinsong sect master, and only the Dikong Hall master could be on par with him. Now, as long as he showed that he wanted to take care of them, Carp tribe and Chongyue True Temple would definitely be afraid, and they would not press on like before. This favor was not small, and it was extremely beneficial to Clear Feather sect, so he had to accept it. However, he did not know when he would be able to repay the 3 favors he promised to help Zhang Yan with. Zhang Yan shook his sleeves, and between his fingers, 2 talisman books floated in the air. He called 2 flood dragons over and ordered them to send them to Chongyue True Temple and Carp tribe. Gong Zhou soon entered the mountain gate. Tao Jinren was also carefree, and he let the restriction formation be open. The 2 of them exchanged a few words, and it was inevitable that they would talk about Donghua. Tao Jinren said, "In these 100 years, there were 2 clear qi in Donghua. One came from your sect, and the other from Yuxiao. From the surface, there were 2 Taoists who achieved a heavenly abode. As for the other sects, if they tried to cover it up, we would not know." Zhang Yan nodded in agreement. After he entered the heavenly abode realm, he understood many things that he did not understand in the past. For example, when a cultivator achieved a heavenly abode, if there was an elder who intentionally covered it up, or hid in a small world and did not come out, then the momentum of the cultivator's achievement might not be noticed by others. In the current Devil's Calamity, there was no guarantee that there would not be descendants of the Devil's sect who achieved this realm. However, a Taoist heavenly abode needed to breathe essence and circulate spiritual opportunity. After a long time, it would definitely not be hidden. Although it was not clear now, it would not be difficult to find out in the future. As the 2 of them were talking, they felt something at the same time. They looked towards the southeast and saw a dharma rising from the horizon. There was a golden carp with claws under its abdomen and horns on its head. It had the shape of a dragon, and its golden light was dazzling, faintly discernible in the clouds. At the same time, a pure white cold chi rose from the northwest. There was a jade drum hidden in it, and it had a pair of wings. As it fluttered, there was a rustling sound. These 2 dharma, one in the south and the other in the north, resonated with each other and shook the sky. Most of the Clear Feather sect disciples did not have high cultivation, so they were all distracted. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. These 2 people should have received his message, but they did not attend the banquet. Instead, they displayed their dharma, which showed that they were dissatisfied, and there was a hidden intention to weigh him. If it was somewhere else, as long as they did not provoke him, he would just laugh it off. However, his intention was to help his fellow Taoists, so he naturally had to agree. He smiled, and with a shake of his body, a qi of Xian floated into the air, and in an instant, it was as tall as the sky, filling up the sky. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.